Chapter 208. After Han Shua's torment, the shop had truly become a place of great danger. Without Han Shua's guidance, anyone who tried to enter would be attacked by the demonic formation. Those with insufficient willpower would lose their minds and seek their own deaths. After the shop had been completely remodeled, Phoebe, Emily, and Gilbert all took up residence. The three of them were on tenterhooks the entire night when they saw the strangeness of the yard, deathly afraid that something would happen to them while they slept soundly. The night passed peacefully, and Trunks returned at noon the next day after having been gone for a few days. As soon as Trunks entered the Valley of Sunshine, he learned from Harris of the Cairo mercenary band that Han Shua's group had moved to the cursed shop. When Trunks arrived, he found that there were suddenly 6 white stone pillars in the yard. He was quite flabbergasted and didn't know what was going on. "When I came over, I heard from Harris that something strange happened here last night. Did you guys run into something?" Trunks asked when he sat down in the living room of the shop. Smiling faintly, Han Shua explained, "We did indeed run into something, but it wasn't some evil god's curse. I created it myself. You don't need to worry about anything, there are quite a few rooms here. I've already reserved one for you. Forget it, it's safer for me to change places. I've seen many owners of this shop die mysteriously in Tanai of Sunshine a few years ago. Although you said that the danger has been resolved, I'm still a bit worried." Trunks was obviously traumatized and immediately waved his hands with a wry smile. "Who is this kid? He dares not believe in Master." Dark Dragon Gilbert was in a bad mood after being called a perverted pervert. He couldn't help but yell when he heard Trunks waffle and refuse to stay. "And who are you?" Trunks started and suddenly looked at Gilbert. The manticore that Trunks had been riding had already displayed abnormalities when he'd entered. The originally fearless manticore was instinctively on guard against Gilbert. It tried not to get too close to Gilbert. As a magical beast with intelligence, the manticore could naturally sense the powerful presence of the super-rank Dark Dragon. Even though Gilbert had transformed into his human form, the manticore still did not dare to approach Gilbert. This was a fear brought about by the difference in rank. As the manticore's master, Gilbert had been with the manticore for a few years and was very familiar with its temperament. Seeing that the manticore was behaving so strangely, Gilbert, who had noticed it from the start, couldn't help but ask. "I am the mighty Black Dragon clan, the future most outstanding king, Gilbert." Gilbert had an arrogant look on his face as he shouted in a booming voice. "Just like your manticore, he's my magical pet, a lecherous little dark dragon." Han Shua flicked a glance at Gilbert and explained to Trunks. Trunks was very shocked when he heard that Gilbert was a dark dragon. He then couldn't help but sigh, "You're really something. I thought taming a manticore was already something to be proud of, but you actually have a dark dragon. It looks like you're a bit stronger than me." "It's not my fault, I just happened to pick up a bargain. It was this dark dragon who shamelessly pestered me." Han Shua shrugged and said modestly. He then paused and changed his tone, asking Trunks, "Right, you didn't run into any danger when you left the valley this time, did you? How did things go?" Trunks' face grew serious when he saw that Han Shua was talking about serious matters. He said lowly, "Don't worry, I'm more familiar with the geography of the Valley of Sunshine than Loredan and Florida. It won't be easy for anyone to harm me in the Valley of Sunshine. I've met with some of my old friends and they've expressed great interest in forming a mercenary band. I've already arranged for people to apply for the title of Soul Destroyer. We'll be able to officially have our own title before long." Nodding, Han Shua said, "That's good. This will be our base of operations now. With Florida's power, he'll surely be able to find our current location. We don't need to be in a hurry, we just need to wait for him to attack us." With the existence of the magical formation, Han Shua wanted to test it out on Florida's men. He wanted to see if the magical formation was as wondrous as Chu Kanglin's memories had described. Unexpectedly, neither Florida's men nor Edwin came looking for trouble after another 2 days. Han Shua's group stayed here for the past 2 days, only wandering around the busy merchant streets for a bit during the day. All the materials needed to refine the wood elite zombie had finally been gathered. Phoebe used these days to discuss a few deals with a few merchants, exchanging 2/3 of the jewels and crystals that Han Shuo had given her for 40,000 gold coins. These 40,000 gold coins were handed over to Trunks with great trust by Han Shuo, allowing him to use them reasonably to form the Soul Destroyer mercenary band. Han Shuo silently practiced his magical arts in his room, not taking a single step out of the shop in the past 2 days. After a low incantation, the courtyard that was illuminated by the sun was suddenly covered by dark green clouds, plunging the entire courtyard into darkness. The sinister greenish-black clouds engulfed the entire radiance of the sun. A strong deathly aura spread rapidly, filling the courtyard in an instant. The vengeful spirits sealed in the stone pillars sensed this wonderful aura and seemed to be eager to make a move. The canopy of necromancy spell could cause the aura of death to spread out. Dark creatures within the range of the canopy of necromancy would greatly increase their attack power. Once an enemy fell within the range of the canopy of necromancy, their fighting strength would be weakened by the spell. Not only had Han Shuo grasped all of the spells that adept mages should be able to grasp now, but he could also skillfully use them. If he returned to the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force with his current strength, Han Shuo was confident that he could easily advance to adept mage. According to his agreement with Fanny, as long as Han Shuo advanced to adept mage, he would have the right to interact with her. Whenever he thought of Fanny's feelings for him, Han Shuo felt extremely motivated. Although he now possessed the hearts of 2 beauties, Emily and Phoebe, his feelings for Fanny were irreplaceable by the 2 women. Han Shuo had never slacked off on his magical arts training. However, at this stage, the demon infant needed some soul energy to replenish and strengthen. Just relying on hard training wouldn't allow him to make great progress in a short period of time. Therefore, Han Shuo was waiting for an opportunity to find the souls of some experts to replenish the nutrients that his demon infant needed. One evening, as Han Shuo was cultivating his magical arts with his eyes closed, he suddenly felt the call of the little skull. An anxious emotion suddenly came from a distant plane. The little skull's call was urgent, and carried a kind of panic as if he was struggling to avoid danger. With his previous experience, Han Shuo immediately knew that the little skull must have run into danger again. Without thinking too much, Han Shuo immediately chanted an incantation through the connection between the 2 of them, attempting to summon the little skull from the distant plane to him. After the incantation was completed, the space in front of him suddenly seemed to have been sliced open by a sharp knife. The little skull's 7 bone spurs flickered as it shot out from the torn space like lightning. However, behind the little skull, the torn space suddenly reflected the figure of a giant knight that was 5 to 6 meters tall, riding a strange fire horse, and wielding a broadsword that was 2 meters long. A huge rotten aura came from this giant shadow. The overwhelming aura of death was so strong that it made people's hearts tremble. This dark creature from another world was restricted by the laws of space, and it could only reveal a huge shadow. Then, when the little skull landed in front of Han Shuo, the torn space suddenly returned to normal, and the huge aura disappeared without a trace. The astonished little skull held his bone knife in his left hand and the eye patch in his right hand. After losing the eye patch in his left eye, the purple demon eye that the little skull obtained from the Dad-era demon statue blinked and shone with a purple light as he stared blankly at Han Shuo. Suddenly, a huge force burst out from the purple demon eye in the left eye of the little skull. This force instantly burst out, and with the purple demon eye as the center, it tried to invade the bodies of the little skull and Han Shuo, intending to take control of the bodies of the little skull and Han Shuo. Just like the situation in the Holy Land of Forest Troll, this force came from the purple demon eye. It was filled with a violent desire to plunder everything, and it would suddenly attack after the eye patch was taken off, as if the demon Dad-era demon had really left a part of her divine sense in the purple demon eye. Put on the eye patch, hurry up. Han Shuo's entire body trembled from the pain, as if several sharp knives were violently stirring in his mind. He suddenly yelled out, his body trembling with pain. The little skull was also suffering. He fell to the ground and kept rolling. After receiving the order from Han Shuo, he finally put on the eye patch with trembling hands. Miraculously, the force that invaded the bodies of the 2 disappeared without a trace as the eye patch was put on. However, Just as Han Shuo heaved a sigh of relief and turned to look at the little skeleton, he saw purple light shoot out of the little skeleton's left eye. The eye patch that he'd been using to cover his purple demon eye seemed to be incinerated by a raging fire, turning into sparks and disappearing in the wind. Chapter 209. After the eye patch that sealed the purple demon eye was incinerated into ashes, the purple demon eye embedded in the little skull's left eye socket once again emitted a blinding purple light. In an instant, the heart-wrenching pain once again invaded Han Shuo and the little skull's bodies. The unforgettable pain caused both Han Shuo and the little skull to tremble uncontrollably. In the room, Han Shuo couldn't help but let out a low growl. The little skull's white mouth was also smacking its lips. The man and the skeleton were simultaneously invaded by an inexplicable power. Suddenly, the demon infant that was originally hibernating in Han Shuo's lower abdomen produced a huge suction force, much to Han Shuo's surprise. In an instant, Han Shuo had the illusion that the demon infant had become a boundless black hole. With the demon infant as the center, Han Shuo's body seemed to have become a huge spider web, and all of his meridians had become tenacious lines that resembled spider webs. The power that invaded Han Shuo's body was attracted by the demon infant and automatically gathered at Han Shuo's demon infant through the spider web-like meridians like a trickle returning to the sea. Following this sudden change in his body, the unforgettable pain suddenly weakened by a lot. The power that invaded Han Shuo's body was sent to the demon infant through his meridians. Just like how Johnny's soul energy was digested and absorbed, it furiously nourished the demon infant's growth. After the pain in his body gradually came under control, Han Shuo saw that the little skull was still rolling on the ground. With a thought, Han Shuo suddenly struggled to come to the little skull's side. He opened his left hand and aimed his palm at the left eye socket of the little skull where the purple demon eye was stored. He took the initiative to release the demonic art of assimilation. His left hand suddenly shone with a dense demonic light. Rays of faint purple light flowed from Han Shuo's arm into Han Shuo's body. Just like the power in Han Shuo's body, it was sent to the demon infant through his meridians. At this time, Han Shuo was sure that the power from the purple demon eye was also soul energy. It seemed to have a close relationship with the protector of the forest troll, the demon Dadera. Perhaps it really was a wisp of soul energy left behind by the demon Dadera in this plane. Compared to Johnny's soul energy, the soul energy that came from the purple demon eye was much larger and purer. It was filled with a violent and plundering aura and wasn't rejected by the demon infant at all. Once it fell into the demon infant would frantically circulate it and slowly convert and purify the enormous power. Looking inside the demon infant, Han Shuo could see that the demon infant was like a sun burning with black demonic fire, bursting with blazing demonic light. Han Shuo's body also shone brightly at this time. Waves of violent, chaotic, evil demonic energy curled around Han Shuo's body. From afar, it looked like Han Shuo suddenly had countless black arms dancing around his body. After an unknown amount of time, Han Shuo suddenly let go. There was a crisp crack, and the purple demon eye in the little skull's left eye socket seemed to have shattered. The purple demon eye suddenly became dim, and a cloud of dense purple smoke overflowed from his left eye socket. The demon infant was still circulating frantically. The soul energy that it had just obtained from the purple demon eye was much stronger than what it had obtained from Johnny a few days ago. When Han Shuo sensed that all the power had been absorbed by the demon infant, he gave an order to the little skull to protect himself. He sat cross-legged and entered a state of bitter cultivation and digestion. The power of the purple demon eye was completely absorbed by Han Shuo's demon infant. The little skull, who was in excruciating pain like Han Shuo, sat on the ground in a daze for a long time. After the strange power of the purple demon eye disappeared, it was embedded in the little skull's left eye socket. As it rolled around, it gave the little skull a more lively look. What's going on? When Emily and Gilbert sensed the black demonic aura bursting out from Han Shuo's room, they couldn't help but come to investigate. When the little skull, who was sitting on the ground, heard the noise outside, it straightened its legs and stood up. The purple demon eye blinked a few times, and it walked to the door to open it. When Emily and Gilbert saw the door open and a short, pure white little skull suddenly appeared in front of them. The little skull had a purple eyeball in its left eye socket, and it was rolling around. They were shocked and couldn't help but take a few steps back. It pointed at Han Shuo with its left hand. The little skull's left eye rolled around, and it looked at Emily and Gilbert. It put its hand on its mouth and made a shushing gesture, which meant, he needs silence. Don't disturb him. Emily and Gilbert stared at the little skull that was asking them to keep quiet. For a moment, they felt that the scene in front of them was too challenging. A dark creature making such a humanoid gesture in front of them, especially with its left eye socket and its eyeball moving around. All of this was so unimaginable. It was a good thing that this wasn't Emily's first day knowing Han Shuo. When she had first fought with Han Shuo, she had already suffered at the hands of this little skull. Therefore, when she carefully looked at the little skull and discovered the 7 bone spurs on its back, she immediately understood that although the color of the bones had changed, this little skull was still the mysterious little skull that was immune to most dark magic, the one that had chased her for days and left her helpless. I think your master must have made some miraculous progress again. Let's not disturb him. Taking a deep breath, Emily shook her head at Gilbert, indicating for Gilbert to retreat with her. Last time in the Cemetery of Death, the Earth Elite Zombies' sudden outburst had already made Gilbert realize that the dark creatures his master had summoned were absolutely different from the ones he knew. A zombie could form an enormous ravine in the ground and attack him because of a single sentence. Then this little skull with humanoid gestures wasn't that hard to understand. I think it'll be very interesting in the future to follow a master like this. Gilbert looked at the little skeleton with great curiosity and waved goodbye. He closed the door and said to Emily, "It's fine, but it's fine." I think so too, but you need to continuously improve yourself. Otherwise, you might discover one day that you can't even beat a dark creature your master has summoned. Emily had heard from Han Shuo that the dark creatures he'd refined had limitless potential to evolve on their own. She hadn't quite believed it at first, but now that she'd seen the little skull's performance, she was convinced without a doubt. Han Shuo didn't feel anything when Emily and Gilbert entered. The enormous power from the purple demon eye allowed Han Shuo to focus his attention to the extreme, completely unaffected by the various disturbances of the outside world. Some demonic practitioners would need to find an extremely quiet place to train in seclusion when they needed to practice a certain secret art or demonic treasure. They would also need to set up layers of defensive measures to prevent others from disturbing them. The reason why they were so cautious was because that state was when the demonic practitioner would be least prepared. They couldn't be disturbed in the slightest when refining demonic treasures or practicing demonic arts. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would suffer chi deviation and waste all their previous efforts. Another 2 days and 2 nights passed after Han Shuo's preparations. Han Shuo didn't take a single step out of his room during these 2 days and 2 nights. Phoebe, Emily, and Trunks didn't slack off during these 2 days. They were either busy with the matters of establishing the mercenary band or continuing to discuss business to help Han Shuo sell the jewels and items. On this day, in the middle of the night, a few people were in the shop discussing how to make better use of the gold coins and manage the mercenary group's affairs. Suddenly, a mercenary from the Cairo mercenary group knocked on the door and said that a group of people were on their way. The mercenary from the Cairo mercenary group immediately left after reporting this information. He said that he needed to report this information to the leader or vice leader of the Cairo mercenary group. He told Emily and the others to be careful and that their people would arrive within half an hour. It looks like the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band has arrived. Brian can't be disturbed at the moment, and we don't know when he'll wake up either. This is a bit troublesome, Emily said with a slight frown after the mercenary left. Who cares who they are? If they dare trespass here, we'll make them suffer the consequences. Dark Dragon Gilbert obviously didn't take this matter to heart as he spoke carelessly. It won't be that easy to deal with. Florida's Rainbow Sickle mercenary band is full of experts, and the Church of Light has also sent some experts to him. You may not be able to win even if you transform into your dragon form. Trunks' brow was also deeply furrowed as he spoke lowly. Brian can't be disturbed right now. There's that dark creature protecting him inside and he shouldn't be able to leave. We must protect him if he's here. As long as we hold them off for a while and wait for the Cairo mercenary band to arrive, then there won't be any problems. Phoebe thought for a moment and responded. The hoofbeats of the warhorses resounded in the silent night sky. From the volume of the sound, one could tell that the hooves of the warhorses were covered by something soft like cotton cloth. Be careful, protect Brian's room first. Emily called out lightly and instructed the others. Chapter 2:10. The enemy had come faster than they had imagined. The clattering of iron hooves had just sounded in the distance when strange noises came from the rooftops. Come, let's leave the room and go into the yard. Trunk's expression was calm as he hefted a long sword and led the way into the yard with the manticore. There was a wide yard in the center of the shop, surrounded by several large and small houses that surrounded the yard. If the enemy came to attack, and the power of their attacks directly passed through the walls and into the houses, they would be forced into a passive position if they wanted to leave after adding fire magic to it. In addition, the yard had been meticulously decorated by Han Shua. Han Shua had once told them that the 6 pillars contained great danger, but if they stood in a special position next to the pillars, they would instead be unaffected by the formation. The formation hadn't been activated yet, but if the 6 pillars were fiercely attacked, the formation would automatically react even without Han Shua's orders. We're not familiar with the things in the yard, so don't act rashly unless we have no other choice. But if we really can't withstand it, we'll attack the stone pillars and quickly hide in 6 safe places. Let's gamble. Emily walked into the yard and took out her staff as she spoke to the 3. The canopy of necromancy that Han Shua had cast last time was no longer effective because it had been 2 days. Specks of starlight were embedded in the night sky like diamonds, adding a few scattered glimmers to the pitch-black night, allowing the people in the yard to roughly make out everything around them. Suddenly, a sharp whistle tore through the air as a small bone dagger, glittering with cold light, abruptly shuttled through the rooftops like a drifting ghost. The sharp whistle of the small bone dagger tore through the silence of the night. The dim light was extremely conspicuous and carried a cold, icy aura of death as it flew in an irregular, mysterious trajectory above the rooftops around the yard. A few soft poochy noises sounded in the dark corners where the little bone blade flew past. In those places where it was difficult to see, a hair-raising scream suddenly sounded. Then, 3 pitch-black figures fell to the ground in a sorry manner, falling from the roof to the courtyard with 3 putong noises. When Trunks and the other 2 saw this, they immediately understood what had happened. When they saw the 3 people lying on the ground not far away, they didn't even think about it and went forward to stab them a few times. The 3 of them staggered as they tried to stand up, but under the 2 slashes of Trunks and Phoebe, their knees gave way and they fell down forever. With the 3 dead, Trunks and the other 2 looked at Han Shua's room in shock. They saw that a corner of a window in the tightly shut room had been lifted open. The purple demon eye in the left eye of the little skull was spinning and flashing with a strange purple light. It was like a ball of purple will-o'-the-wisp dancing behind the dark window. A white bone claw that was as white as jade leaned against the window, and the 5 white bones swayed continuously. The small bone dagger that was flying on the roof seemed to be controlled by the 5 bones of his hand, spinning in a random pattern. What a terrifying little skull! Trunks couldn't help but shake his head with a wry smile as he sighed. Look over there! Gilbert suddenly yelled. Following Gilbert's direction, the 3 saw 3 gray balls of air float out from the heads of the 3 people who had just died. When the 3 gray balls of air left their bodies, they seemed to be drawn by some kind of power and were sucked into 2 stone pillars at the side. If I'm not wrong, those 3 gray balls of air should be the souls of the 3 people who just died. When an ordinary person dies, their soul will return to the earth. Without the use of magic, ordinary people can't see it at all. As a dark archmage, Emily was a bit more knowledgeable in this area than the others. She frowned as she explained to the other 3. Then why can we see it, and why can the stone pillars absorb the 3 gray balls of air? Phoebe asked in confusion. Shaking her head with a wry smile, Emily turned her head to look at the room Han Shua was in and said, "How would I know what's going on? If you want to understand all of this, wait until he wakes up and ask him yourself." This yard is full of oddities anyways, and it's all his doing. I don't think I'd understand even if he explained. She and Emily found it equally difficult to understand the mysteries surrounding Han Shuo. When Emily said this, Phoebe could only shake her head with a wry smile. As the four spoke, the small bone dagger continued to whirl about on the roof. The three fellows who'd planned on ambushing had been caught off guard before they'd even gotten a clear look at the situation, and died a horrible death in an instant. It was truly an unjust injustice. However, these three were only scouts who'd come to investigate. Although they died, the enemies behind them hadn't been affected. Trunks and the others knew that the true battle was finally about to begin when the originally silent sounds of iron hooves suddenly died down. Suddenly, the whistling of the small bone dagger became even more intense. When the four looked over, the small bone dagger had already left the vicinity of the roof and was slicing through the night sky even further away. In the direction where the little bone dagger flew, two faint shadows gradually turned from blurry to clear. In the starry night sky, the two shadows were like two drifting clouds that were blown over by a light breeze. It's two archmages, we need to be careful. Emily's heart jumped as she warned gravely. A scorching flame suddenly appeared in front of the small bone dagger as soon as Emily's words had sounded. The small bone dagger sparkled even more coldly under the illumination of the flames, and the surface of the bone dagger lit up with a blinding light. Suddenly, a few crossbow bolts tore through the air from below. 5 of the crossbow bolts missed, but only one accurately hit the small bone dagger, sending it flying into the distance. With a ding-dong sound, it landed on the street not far away. The sound of the door shattering suddenly sounded at this moment as footsteps rapidly approached. A line of more than 10 people wearing armor and wielding weapons such as swords, spears, axes, and bows filled the courtyard in an instant. The two archmages who'd floated over also stood on the roof without the threat of the bone dagger, watching the scene with cold eyes. Trunks, you're here as well. The fire archmage who'd saved Florida last time in front of the Valley of Sunshine stood on the roof and looked coldly at Trunks. Andy, you traitor, you still have the face to see me? The old chief treated you well back then. The magic staff in your hand was forged by someone else at great expense. To think that you'd be with that animal Florida after the old chief died. Trunks pointed the long sword in his hand at the fire archmage Andy and rebuked coldly. The old chief's death was an accident. He died at the hands of bandits in the surrounding mountain ranges and had nothing to do with Florida. It was all because you were jealous that Florida had become the chief of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band that you framed him. Andy looked disdainfully at Trunks and mocked him. I think that with your intelligence, you should be able to tell what the truth is. Now that I've returned, I'll make all of you traitors pay the price. Andy first laughed loudly and then shook his head at Trunks with pity. Today is the day you die. You won't have another chance in the future. Don't waste words with him. Loredan's men can appear at any time. We need to kill them immediately. The other mage who'd come with him said expressionlessly. There was a lightning pattern on the chest of this person's magic robe. It looked like he was a thunder archmage. He was around 30 years old and had a head of long gray hair. His body was as thin as a bamboo pole as he paced back and forth on the roof. Got it. Andy replied impatiently. It seemed that he didn't have a good relationship with this lightning archmage. He then looked down with a slightly strange gaze and said in a strange tone, "Do it." There were more than 10 people in the courtyard, all of them made up of swordsmen, knights, and archers. The weakest among them were journeyman swordsmen and knights. There was also one person wrapped in a long green robe with a pointed hat up. His appearance couldn't be seen in the darkness, but there was a strong presence coming from his body. When Andy had spoken just now, he'd looked at this person indistinctly. His calm voice didn't sound like an order, but rather like he was seeking the opinion of an elder. The person's body suddenly moved as soon as Andy's words fell. An enormous silver sword light abruptly emanated from his body. The sharp sword light cut through the air as his body rose. The pointed hat on his head flew backwards, revealing a face that even Emily and Phoebe were familiar with. Gabriel, it's you. Emily couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Gabriel was Clark's master and had the extraordinary strength of a great sword master. He'd always been by Griffin Legion Commander Asher's side. Who would have thought that he'd appear here? Chapter 2:11. The long sword in Gabriel's hand moved, and a silver sword aura tore through the air, the sharp killing intent chilling to the bone. As Emily cried out in alarm, Trunks and Gilbert had already leapt forward to block Gabriel. Trunks, who was riding on the manticore, had a cold and serious expression on his face as he raised the great sword in his hand, forming a milky white circle of swords in front of him. Gilbert held a dark spear in his hand. Since he didn't practice any martial arts techniques, he purely used the tough body of his dragon race to viciously throw out a spear. The sound of metal clashing rang out as Trunks and the manticore dodged in panic with a muffled groan. Gilbert's spear had been broken into two, and his chest had been cut open by the sword aura, revealing a large piece of dark skin. Great Sword Master Gabriel's expression was cold and sinister, and he was calm and composed after that strike. He wasn't in a hurry to immediately attack, but instead cast his gaze towards the room where Honshu and Little Skull were. The howl of the bone dagger suddenly sounded at this moment as a small, dark bone dagger suddenly shot out from the direction Gabriel was looking at. The little skeleton's left eye, glowing with purple light, focused on Gabriel as the 5 white bone claws on its left hand waved continuously. Trunks, who was still panting, and Gilbert, who was drenched in cold sweat, were both shocked by Gabriel's terrifying strength. It was just a simple strike, but Trunks had been attacked with the force of an avalanche, and could only dodge. As for the powerful Gilbert, because he didn't know how to use martial arts techniques, his spear had been cut in two by the silver fighting aura. If he hadn't dodged in time, his chest would have been injured by the fighting aura. However, just as the two were having a headache over how to deal with Gabriel, Little Skull's assistants arrived just in time. A dark bone blade forced Gabriel to treat it with caution. The spell to control a demonic treasure was a secret technique unique to demonic arts practitioners. Gabriel had obviously been stunned by this miraculous attack, which was why he had given up on pursuing Gilbert and Trunks, and instead focused all his attention on dealing with Little Skull's bone dagger. The silver sword gleam was dazzling, and under the starry sky, it was like fireworks exploding in the night sky. It formed a tight defense around Gabriel. The small bone daggers revolved around Gabriel's body, emitting sharp whistles as they danced around, attempting to deal a fatal blow to Gabriel. "What are you guys standing there looking at? Attack immediately!" Andy suddenly shouted at this time. The group of armored mercenaries who'd been dumbfounded by the little bone dagger's miraculous attacks were finally roused from their stupor by this shout. They either raised their bows and took aim, or raised their swords to circle around Gabriel and charge at Trunks and the others. Andy and the Thunder Archmage on the rooftop saw the swordsmen and knights make their move and didn't remain idle either. They coordinated with these people and started attacking Emily and the others with magic. In an instant, 3 blazing fireballs the size of millstones fell from the roof towards where Emily and the others were standing with violent, raging flames. A few bolts of lightning tore through the sky, accompanied by a crackling sound, and struck that space. "Not good!" Emily cried out in alarm as she released a dark magic spell that she'd already prepared. It was like a giant, oily green net that appeared above everyone's heads as Emily chanted. As soon as the giant net formed, it first stalled the 3 fireballs. However, the lightning attacks passed through the gaps in the giant net and continued smashing towards them. Emily and the others were constantly changing their positions below, dodging the void lightning all over the place. For a time, the ground in the courtyard crackled. 2 of the Azura stone pillars were also bombarded by the lightning, flashing with dazzling light. A clang sounded from Gabriel's direction. Having gotten used to the Little Skull bone dagger's attacks, Gabriel's sword accurately struck the bone dagger and sent the spinning bone dagger crashing to the ground. "Friend in the house, your miraculous techniques are admirable, but your sneak attack style is a bit despicable. Since you have such a miraculous technique, you should walk out of the house openly and fight me for real." Great Sword Master Gabriel naturally thought that this miraculous technique of controlling the bone dagger had come from Honshu, who had been cultivating in the house in silence. Although he'd seen the little skull's slightly strange gesture of flipping his 5 white fingers, he wasn't willing to believe that such a strange attack had come from a low-level dark creature. However, what the little skull was doing below immediately shattered his understanding. As soon as Gabriel finished speaking, the left eye of the little skull, who had been standing behind the window, suddenly lit up with a purple light. He leapt out of the window and faced Gabriel's provocation head-on. The 5 white bones on his right hand hooked, and the bone dagger on the ground suddenly flew up with a whoosh and landed in his bony claw like lightning. Gabriel couldn't react for a moment. He stared at the little skull in disbelief and was momentarily stunned. At this moment, something even more shocking happened. He saw the little skull bend his body, and the 7 bone spurs on his back suddenly flew out and shot towards him like 7 bolts of lightning. "Oh my God!" A cry of surprise that only Gabriel could hear came from his mouth. Gabriel then once again became a passive defender. He condensed his silver fighting aura on his longsword and formed a tight defense around him, bitterly resisting the 7 bone spurs' flying attacks. The little skull wielding the bone dagger danced as he dashed into the attacking mercenaries. The miraculous little skull revealed his cruel side. With a bend of his leg bone and a flick, the little skull's body was like a bolt of lightning as he landed in the midst of these people. The bone claw in his empty left hand suddenly stabbed out, and with a "pu" sound, 5 bloody holes appeared in the chest of a middle-ranked swordsman. Blood flowed out like a fountain. With a swing of the bone dagger in his right hand, the head of a nearby mercenary flew high up from his neck. Blood sprayed everywhere from the decapitated neck, dyeing the white bones of the little skull a bewitching blood red. 2 arrows whizzed through the air and hit the bones of the little skull's back and chest with a "dang-dang" sound. The 2 arrows fell to the ground with a clatter sound, but there were only 2 white scratch marks on the bones of the little skull's chest and back. The 2 arrows didn't seem to have harmed the little skeleton, but the little skeleton was affected as well. His body, which had been moving swiftly, couldn't help but stagger a bit when he was hit by 2 arrows from the front and 1 from the back. A few mercenaries nearby took advantage of this opportunity to greet him with their swords and spears. For a moment, "dang-dang" sounds came from his white bones. This series of attacks seemed to have stunned the little skull. Even the miraculous manipulation of the 7 bone spurs had suddenly stopped. The 7 bone spurs that were originally flying around Gabriel and attacking him spun uncontrollably and hit an azure stone pillar to the side with a "ding-dang-dang" sound. As if they had triggered some sort of restriction, a cold wind suddenly blew in the courtyard and a thick aura of death suddenly spread in all directions. The dark sky was covered by the aura of death, and not a single speck of starlight shone down. Only a blood-red evil light soared into the sky from the center. The 6 white bone pillars that had been deathly silent suddenly emitted a terrifying howl. The sharp howl, like the wails of ghosts and the howls of wolves, made one's scalp go numb. It was as if a malicious ghost was lying next to one's ear and licking one's earlobe with its blood-red tongue. Some of the ghostly images on the stone pillars came to life in an instant, each of them baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. The 6 stone pillars seemed to have become 6 evil beasts with thousands of tentacles, constantly waving all kinds of ghostly claws and attacking all living things in the surroundings. "Hurry and hide!" Emily yelled when she saw that the demonic formation in the courtyard had been triggered. The few people who already knew what was going on had already started moving when Emily cried out in alarm. They hurriedly stood in the safe spots that Han Shua had instructed them to. Footsteps sounded again from outside. Another dozen or so people from the Cairo mercenary band had been standing guard around the shop. They couldn't help but rush in when they saw that they hadn't taken care of the people inside after so long. They all stood in the courtyard. Dark Grand Magus Edwin and the Calamity Church's female alchemist Belinda stood together on a large tree 3 shops away. They looked at the place where the blood-red light was flashing and the ghostly winds were howling. Can it be that the legendary curse of the evil god has really happened? Belinda's eyes were filled with shock as she spoke to Edwin. "I don't know, the presence inside is very strange. Even I don't know what's going on. Let's not go near for now and see what's going on first." Edwin shook his head in confusion. Chapter 212. What's going on? What's going on? I can't see anything. Someone's attacking me. What's going on with this courtyard? Everyone be careful, this is the strangest place in the Valley of Sunshine. The evil god's curse must have flared up. Retreat, everyone leave the courtyard. No one will be able to escape once the evil god's curse flares up. Panicked shouts rang out from the mouths of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band members who'd entered the courtyard. These people had obviously heard of the legend of this shop, and when they saw the sudden change, they all tried to leave immediately, trembling with fear. However, the first illusory formation had already begun to take effect as soon as the formation had been activated. Apart from Emily and the others who'd chosen a safe spot to stand in, everyone else from the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band who'd rashly barged in couldn't see their surroundings clearly under the dense aura of death. Under these circumstances, a few white shadows suddenly shot out from the deep well in the center of the courtyard. The water ghosts sensed the presence of living people and started attacking the mercenaries next to them without hesitation. In that instant, the three mercenaries felt a chill in their bodies, as if a liquid had invaded their bodies. In a trance, their minds were muddled, as if they'd been tempted by a voice. They couldn't help but jump into the deep well one after another. With three plopping sounds, the three of them jumped into the well of their own accord. When they sensed the cold well water, their muddled minds immediately regained clarity. When they wanted to climb out of the well without a care for anything else, their bodies were already completely out of their control. They couldn't move a single step in the well, and instead sank bit by bit. Three despairing shouts suddenly rang out from the well. The voices were filled with boundless terror and despair, causing the scalps of the mercenaries in the courtyard to go numb. It was also at this moment that they finally realized that this courtyard was indeed filled with many unknown dangers. It was with this realization that they immediately gave up on the idea of staying here. Each of them moved quickly in the courtyard according to their memories, trying to leave this evil and dangerous place as fast as possible. However, the courtyard, which was not very wide, suddenly became infinitely long and distant. They retreated according to their own memories. Their flying bodies should have left this place long ago, but unfortunately, they could never feel the end. Shrill howls like ghosts and howls like wolves continued to scream in their ears. The illusion suddenly attacked them, and another version of themselves appeared in front of them. Holding a sharp weapon in their hand and wearing a hideous smile on their face, they began to attack them mercilessly. The fear brought about by this phenomenon instantly destroyed their willpower, causing their fighting spirit to completely collapse. Screaming in fear, crying helplessly, and waving the weapons in their hands indiscriminately. In an instant, all the mercenaries inside fell into a state of madness and irritation. Facing his other self's cruel attack, no matter how determined the mercenary was, he still found it hard to accept it. He was equally terrified and agitated as if he had gone mad. Just like that, all of the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries that had entered the courtyard went crazy in an instant and started to fight amongst themselves. Cries of despair, screams of extreme pain, and the sounds of metal clashing rang out from every corner of the courtyard. Emily and the other three, who were in a few safe spots, had their vision affected and couldn't see what was happening in the courtyard at all. However, the mixed cries and screams made them realize that the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries were currently in an unforgettable situation. More often than not, a shrill scream would abruptly stop, signifying the disappearance of a life. Afterwards, they could see a wisp of gray air being absorbed by the Shura pillars beside them. As the souls disappeared one by one, the Shura pillars that had absorbed these souls seemed to provide an even greater amount of evil energy to the formation in the courtyard, causing the chilly winds in the courtyard to grow stronger and the aura of death to spread faster and thicker. Andy and the Thunder Archmage could only watch helplessly as the strange changes occurred in the courtyard. The thick aura of death covered the sky above the courtyard, and apart from a beam of blood-red light shooting into the sky from the center, there was nothing else that they could see. Just like Emily and the others, the sounds of despair and helplessness continued to reverberate in their ears. Unlike Emily and the others, Andy and the other mage felt their scalps go numb and their hearts tremble. They didn't dare cast their fire and thunder magic recklessly because they couldn't distinguish their targets. They could only stand anxiously on the roof, scratching their ears and cheeks as they tried to find a suitable solution. While everyone's vision was affected, Little Skull, who had been standing in the center of the courtyard, had his purple left eye flash with a strong light. He was like a graceful gentleman strolling leisurely through a ball. Little Skull wielded the bone dagger in his hand and took a brisk pace as he walked unhurriedly through the mercenaries who had fallen into a state of frenzy and were waving their blades wildly. As he reached out with his left bony claw, 5 bloody holes appeared on the bodies of the mercenaries, or their necks were directly twisted off. The bone dagger flashed with a cold light as it drew a beautiful arc in the air, ending with a mournful scream. This meant that a life had been lost. As the attacking mercenaries fell one by one, the great swordmaster Gabriel became Little Skull's final target. Gabriel was much more difficult to deal with than he'd imagined. The silver sword veil covered his surroundings, and his eyebrows twitched. Although he was also affected by the formation, he didn't rush to attack everything around him, and only firmly defended his position. It was this extremely conservative approach that caused him to receive the weakest attacks. The mercenaries who were close to him were all blocked by the sword light due to the difference in strength between them. However, these mercenaries either killed each other or were easily slaughtered by Little Skull. Gabriel's body wasn't affected much apart from the severe loss of fighting aura. When Little Skull got close to Gabriel, it wasn't that easy to take Gabriel's life with the same method. With the attitude that he didn't want to make any mistakes, Great Swordmaster Gabriel firmly defended his position, condensing his silver fighting aura into a screen and tightly defending himself. When Little Skull arrived, he was also helpless against the Great Swordmaster's pure defense. Beside Gabriel, Little Skull rubbed his smooth skull in annoyance. His purple demon eye spun as he seemed to be thinking of a good countermeasure. Who dares ignore the existence of the Cairo mercenary band and commit murder in Tanai? Lordan's explosive roar came from afar, sweeping over like the great waves of the ocean. Following Lordan's explosive roar, the sound of heavy footsteps rapidly approached from afar. Not good, the thunder monster is here, we have to retreat immediately. The thunder archmage on the roof suddenly called out lowly. But Gabriel is still down there. Andy also had a face full of anxiety as he looked worriedly at the yard below and called out softly. We can't care about that anymore. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to leave when the thunder monster arrives. Of course, if you want to die, I won't let you stay either. The thunder archmage said faintly and didn't look at Andy again. He used the levitation spell to rise into the air and fly off into the distance. Andy froze for a while and finally shook his head helplessly. He stomped his foot and also used the levitation spell to fly off, following behind the thunder archmage and disappearing into the night. After Andy and the thunder archmage left, Edwin and Belinda silently followed from a nearby tree. At this moment, the aura of death and Ian in the yard was quickly absorbed by the 6 stone pillars. Starlight reappeared in the yard in an extremely short amount of time, and the effects of the formation had been withdrawn. Apart from the corpses littering the ground, only Gabriel was left, still brandishing his sword. Kill him! Gilbert suddenly yelled out and grabbed a battleaxe from a mercenary's corpse, rushing towards Gabriel with a howl. Belinda and Trunks also knew that this was a rare opportunity. They brandished their weapons at the same time and rushed towards Gabriel as fast as they could, combining the strength of Little Skull Gilbert to launch fierce attacks at Gabriel. Gabriel reacted quickly when the threat of the formation had disappeared. He only needed to take a quick look at the surroundings to know that this operation had completely failed. Gabriel moved without any hesitation and leapt towards the roof. It was also at this moment that the attacks of Gilbert and the others arrived. Gabriel waved his longsword and silver fighting aura flared up, sending the rocks on the roof flying to block the attacks behind him. The flying battleaxe blocked a large chunk of the rocks with a series of explosions. The bone dagger whistled through the air, not only shattering the remaining rocks, but also posing a great threat to Gabriel. When the longsword swung, an arc of light suddenly appeared and finally pushed Little Skull's bone dagger to the side. However, the 2 waves of fighting aura from Trunks and Phoebe finally reached Gabriel. A ghastly cry rang out from Gabriel's mouth as he staggered. His rapidly flying body suddenly became crisscrossed with sword marks, and it was obvious that he'd been seriously injured. He spat out large mouthfuls of blood as he fled in a panic. Emily had used a levitation spell to take to the air and was just about to chant a dark magic spell to give Gabriel the final blow when a fierce arrow shot out from nowhere like a bolt of cold lightning. The arrow was swift and carried with it a cold aura. Emily could already feel the icy aura contained in the arrow even before it neared her. Emily had been about to chant an offensive spell when she abruptly stopped herself. Her body that had been flying towards the roof suddenly dropped down from the air. However, that cold arrow was still relentless. It carried with it a frightening coldness and viciousness as it shot towards Emily's slender, white neck like a bolt of lightning. At this moment, there was no time to chant any spells. Chapter 2:13. Taking a deep breath, Han Shuo forcibly suppressed his raging bloodlust. The urge to go on a killing spree slowly subsided as he took a few deep breaths. In the eyes of Trunks and the others, as Han Shuo took a few deep breaths, his originally callous and bloodthirsty appearance, specks of bloody light, and ferocious killing intent slowly disappeared without a trace. In the end, he once again returned to the appearance they were familiar with. "What's wrong with you?" Emily let out a sigh of relief when she saw that Han Shuo had returned to normal. Her beautiful eyes focused on Han Shuo with worry as she asked hastily. "My martial arts technique has just reached an unfamiliar realm. It's the hardest to control one's mental state in this realm. I'm not familiar with this new realm yet, so I lost my composure a bit." Han Shuo's expression returned to normal as he revealed a faint smile and explained to everyone. "You gave me a fright. Your expression and aura just now were extremely evil and terrifying. It made my heart tremble just looking at you." Trunks looked deeply at Han Shuo and said with lingering fear. The little skeleton was the only one who didn't show any signs of abnormality. When he saw Han Shuo appear, the little skeleton waved his arms and legs in joy, gesticulating something. From time to time, he would point at the corpses all over the ground, as if telling Han Shuo about his accomplishments. Chuckling in relief, Han Shuo could feel Little Skull's desire to show off, as if waiting for Han Shuo's praise. "Come here, stinking brat. Not bad." He waved his hand and waited for the little skeleton to obediently walk towards Han Shuo with the bone dagger in hand. Han Shuo reached out and rubbed the little skeleton's smooth, jade-like skull. The little skeleton's purple left eye swiveled about as he smacked his white jaw repeatedly. He appeared to be very satisfied. "Honored master, you're so biased. You've never treated me so kindly before." Gilbert complained when he saw Han Shuo spoiling Little Skull so much. Little Skull had been by Han Shuo's side ever since he was still an errand boy. In the beginning, he'd just been throwing away junk and helping Han Shuo with some trivial matters. As Little Skull grew stronger, he'd helped Han Shuo deal with a few crises. This kind of relationship wasn't something that Gilbert could compare to. Han Shuo glanced at Gilbert and was about to say something when he suddenly creased his brows and cast his gaze towards the door he'd come in from. Loriton of the Cairo mercenary band was like an iron tower as he walked through the door. Harris and a group of experts followed behind him. Loriton had a burly figure, and his weight was probably a bit heavier than a warhorse. His footsteps made dull thumps as he walked. "What's going on? Where are the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band?" Loriton yelled out in a voice as loud as a bell. Pointing at the corpses all over the ground, Han Shuo smiled. "Aren't they all on the ground?" Loriton's brow furrowed when he heard these words and focused his attention on the ground. He opened his mouth to list the names one by one as if he was reciting his family's treasures. Angela, Turidge, Gilia. His expression was replaced with astonishment when he heard Loriton's words. When he finally lifted his head to look at Han Shuo, his face was full of shock as he said, "You killed all of them? Perhaps, the curse of the evil god may have helped us." Han Shuo smiled mysteriously and shrugged his shoulders as he replied carelessly. "These people are indeed from the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band, and some of them are even the core members of the band. I hadn't thought that you would be able to kill so many experts. You've truly helped us greatly." Harris couldn't conceal the excitement on his face when he walked in, and even his voice sounded a bit louder than usual. Just what's going on? Loriton was greatly puzzled by Han Shua's answer and couldn't help but ask. Loriton, you're late. You only arrived after the battle had ended. It looks like your Cairo mercenary band isn't as fast as we'd imagined. Trunks flicked a glance at Han Shua and spoke on behalf of Han Shua. Trunks, you also know that every place in the Valley of Sunshine needs to be guarded. Our Cairo mercenary band couldn't possibly have stationed most of our men here just for this place. Loriton said and then snorted coldly with an annoyed expression, Florida is too arrogant. How dare he ignore our existence? Those who ambushed you didn't even bother to hide their faces, it's obvious that they don't care about us at all. Chief Loriton, I hope you'll be a bit more timely next time. The matters here have already concluded and there's likely nothing else worth your attention. Han Shua suddenly thought of something after saying this and looked at Loriton with a frown. There's a great sword master called Gabriel amongst those who ambushed us this time. He's one of Asher's men, the chief of the Griffin Legion in nearby Valen City. I don't know if the Cairo mercenary band is connected to Asher, I hope you'll pay attention. Great sword master Gabriel! Loriton cried out in surprise. He obviously didn't know of this matter and his expression was a bit grave. Nodding, Han Shua said, correct, this person is the master of Asher's eldest son, Clark. He's always been by Asher's side. I hadn't thought that he'd leave Asher this time and mix with the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. Don't worry, I'll investigate all of this. Alright, if there's nothing else, we'll be leaving first. Loriton's face darkened and he seemed to be thinking about something as he said a bit anxiously. Wait, I've left the Valley of Sunshine for too long and don't know much about Florida's strength. It's best if you can give us detailed information on the experts and strength of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. A Thunder Archmage and a female archer with amazing archery appeared today. One of our companions was almost injured by the female archer this time. We need detailed information on the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. Trunks hastily spoke up when he saw that Loriton was about to leave. Female archer. Loriton cried out once again and then said gravely, then it must be the female elf Maxine. She's a divine archer proficient in water, thunder, and wind magic. She can fuse all three elements into her archery and shoot arrows with terrifying power. This woman is very difficult to deal with. It's said that she's a fiancée that Florida's grandfather found for him. Her origins are very mysterious and she doesn't seem to have a harmonious relationship with Florida. She hasn't spent much time in the Valley of Sunshine in the past few years, but she'll still lend a hand whenever the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band is in danger. It looks like she's back. Who's that Thunder Archmage? It was Emily's turn to ask this time. He's called Asa and joined the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band half a year ago. I'm not too sure of his origins, but he's vicious and merciless. He gets along well with Florida. He's taken care of some of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band's shady dealings in the past half a year. He's deeply trusted and thought highly of by Florida. Loriton seemed to be quite familiar with the experts of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. He didn't hesitate at all when faced with Trunks and Emily's questions and explained in great detail. Apart from these two, what other experts have joined the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band in the past few years? Trunks continued to ask. Loriton furrowed his brow and mused for a moment. He turned his head to look at Harris and said, give them a copy of the information we've gathered. Harris started and then nodded. He took out a scroll from his space ring and handed it to Trunks. There's some information on the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band here. It should be more detailed than what Miss Emily knows. It looked like Harris and the others already knew Emily's identity. Tanai was the true ruler of the Valley of Sunshine, and the identities of some people couldn't be hidden from them. Trunks glanced at the scroll and nodded at Han Shua. He then smiled at Loriton, it's very detailed. We'll help you take care of Florida before the Great War. If that's really the case, I'll be very grateful to you. Not only will I give this shop to you unconditionally, but Miss Phoebe's Merchant Guild will also be exempt from all taxes in Tanai. Loriton laughed heartily and turned to walk outside with large strides. Behind him, Harris looked at Trunks and reminded, the back of the scroll is a map of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band's residence. There are detailed notes on the hidden and open sentries. Destroy this scroll after you've seen it. Don't let it fall into the hands of others, lest it cause unnecessary trouble. Nodding in understanding, Trunks smiled coldly, don't worry, I know what to do. Harris and Trunks had known each other for a long time and naturally knew of the irreconcilable hatred between Trunks and Florida. He finally said, good luck. After Loredan and the others left the shop, Han Shua said lowly, Loredan has a good plan, but we can't follow his plans if we want to gain a foothold in the Valley of Sunshine. Tanai doesn't just have the Cairo Mercenary Band and the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. I know that there are a few other powers that aren't small either. I think they want to replace the Cairo Mercenary Band's position and take control of the Valley of Sunshine. Trunks started and then asked Han Shua, what do you want to do? Chuckling darkly, Han Shua looked up at the sky and murmured to himself, it's a dark and windy night today. The Valley of Sunshine has already been in chaos for a while. I'll make use of this opportunity to make it even more chaotic. Chapter 2:14. In glorious Tanai, apart from the strongest Cairo Mercenary Band and the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band, there were also the slightly weaker House of Menlo and the Kader Orc tribe. It was said that the House of Menlo was originally a great noble of a small country. They had their own private army and wanted to rebel against the small country, but failed in the end when their plans were exposed. After the battle with the royal army of the small country, the House of Menlo threw away their armor and fled. With their strength greatly reduced, they finally arrived at the Valley of Sunshine. When they arrived at the Valley of Sunshine, they only had 300 soldiers. However, during the chaos of war, the House of Menlo had looted a large amount of wealth from the nobles of that small country. When they arrived at the Valley of Sunshine, they used this fortune to recruit over 1,000 experts of various professions in a few short years. Their strength was only second to the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. The House of Menlo was currently the wealthiest power in the Valley of Sunshine. Patriarch Sawyer Menlo had always wanted to control the Valley of Sunshine, recruit more soldiers, and kill his way back to his homeland to obtain all the power in that country. The Kader Orc tribe was a small tribe of orcs. They had originally lived in the bitterly cold lands, but after many hardships, they had migrated to the Valley of Sunshine and lived in a mountain range near the Valley of Sunshine. There were only 500 to 600 orcs in this tribe, but each of them was a warrior that was extremely difficult to deal with. The orcs of the Kader tribe mainly earned enough commission by protecting orc merchants. It was said that the money they earned was all used to support their wives, children, and elders back home. This power wasn't too big or too small, but the current chief of the Kader tribe had always wanted to enter the Valley of Sunshine and obtain more benefits and gold coins by controlling the Valley of Sunshine. The Cairo Mercenary Band, the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band, the House of Menlo, and the Kader tribe were currently the 4 strongest powers in the Valley of Sunshine. Among them, the Cairo Mercenary Band was the strongest, with over 2,600 mercenaries proficient in battle. The Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band was second, but they also had around 2,000 mercenaries. Then came the House of Menlo's 1,500 soldiers, and finally the Kader tribe's 500 to 600 orc warriors. Out of the 4 powers, only the Cairo Mercenary Band that controlled the Valley of Sunshine was able to gather all of their troops in Tanai. The other 3 powers had only set up a base in Tanai, with all of their troops stationed in the mountain ranges around the Valley of Sunshine. This information wasn't difficult to obtain. Han Shua had learned everything from Emily not long after he'd arrived in the Valley of Sunshine. It was clear to everyone that the 4 powers didn't get along with each other. Each power wanted to occupy the Valley of Sunshine and use its enormous resources to quickly increase their own strength in order to obtain greater benefits. The Cairo Mercenary Band, which originally only had 1,000 people, had more than doubled their numbers in the short span of a few years after they'd taken control of the Valley of Sunshine. This was all because they'd obtained a large sum of gold coins after taking control of the Valley of Sunshine and attracted even more experts to join them. To the Cairo Mercenary Band, it was an excellent idea to greatly reduce the strength of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band without harming their own strength. Comparing a mere shop to the Valley of Sunshine, this deal was a huge profit no matter how one looked at it. It was because he understood the situation in the Valley of Sunshine that Han Shua's heart was filled with ambition. That was why he'd started to think for himself and for the mercenary band that he'd just established. Trunks, take your old comrades and make a trip to the house of Menlo. Cover your faces and stir up some trouble tonight. Kill a few people and set a few fires. Han Shua looked at Trunks and said with a smile. You're saying to make the house of Menlo think that another power did it? Trunks' expression changed as he asked. They definitely won't suspect us if the house of Menlo is attacked because we don't have the strength to do so. There's no need to make them our enemy. They'll definitely suspect the other three powers in the end. Han Shua explained. Trunks nodded and a trace of a sinister smile hung on his face. I think I'm up to the task. I've long since gotten used to the open and veiled struggles among these powers when I was in the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. Alright then, be careful. As long as you don't expose your identities, do your best to wreak havoc. Han Shua chuckled. Trunks didn't say anything else and hurriedly left under the cover of the night. It looked like he was planning on making a move tonight. After Trunks left, Han Shua said darkly to Emily and the others, since the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band has already made a move against us, we can't let them look down on us, can we? Come, let's take a stroll around as well. We'll go to the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band and kill a few people for fun. Now that Han Shua's group had a good relationship with the Cairo Mercenary Band, it was very convenient for them to enter and exit the Valley of Sunshine. However, Han Shua's group didn't leave through the main gates of the Valley of Sunshine this time. Instead, they used Gilbert's ability to fly after transforming into a dragon to fly out of a secluded area in the Valley of Sunshine. The Valley of Sunshine had its own rules. Under normal circumstances, even archmages who could fly couldn't use the levitation spell to enter and exit the Valley of Sunshine. If they were discovered by the Cairo Mercenary Band, they would be detained and interrogated. The moonlight was like water as it sprinkled down on the vast expanse of white. The accumulated snow hadn't melted yet, and the snow-covered mountains and towering ancient trees displayed a different kind of beauty under the moonlight. The Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band was located in a small mountain valley to the east of the Valley of Sunshine. Han Shua and the others, who were riding on Gilbert, could see Tanai on the small mountain in the distance. There were rows of short houses built with red tiles. There was a medium-sized hot spring in the center of the small mountain valley. Steaming hot mist floated above the water, enveloping the small mountain valley in a white mist. There were many fresh flowers and plants planted around the hot spring. Because it was close to the hot spring, the surrounding plants weren't affected by the cold winter and actually bloomed with many beautiful flowers. Strong and sturdy mercenaries were scattered around the small valley, looking around cautiously. They were always on the lookout for an enemy invasion. On a cliff above the mountain valley, Han Shua had Gilbert stop. Han Shua smiled coldly as he looked at the small mountain valley below. Perhaps someone will make a move earlier this time. Phoebe and Emily both revealed puzzled expressions when they heard these words. They looked at Han Shua in confusion, and it was Phoebe who asked, "What's going on?" Dark Grand Magus Edwin and that female alchemist Belinda of the Calamity Church were watching from a distance when I was in the shop. Before I stopped my cultivation, I sensed their location. When Andy and his companion left, they chased after Andy. Edwin and Belinda followed behind Andy first, and then Gabriel and the female archer Maxine. Edwin and Belinda should be in the mountain valley below now. If they've come to kill Florida, then they've helped us greatly. Han Shua responded slowly as he looked at the mountain valley below. Then what should we do now? She didn't know when it had started, but with Han Shua around, Emily had gotten used to letting Han Shua decide everything. Lifting his head to look at the sky, Han Shua said, "Only half of the long night has passed. We still have a lot of time, so why don't we wait for a while?" Time flew by, and after roughly half an hour, intense magical pulses suddenly emanated from the grandest red-tiled house in the center of the small mountain valley below. Under the cool moonlight, an armored puppet beast that looked like a three-eyed evil god suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was made of black iron armor. The golem's enormous body charged straight for the magnificent building as soon as it appeared, and a thick iron tail swept out, sending the red-tiled house's tiles flying and rumbling. At the same time, an earth-shattering rumble came from the place where the strong magical wave was. 3 hands of death appeared out of thin air and floated into the magnificent building through the window, wantonly destroying everything inside. Edwin and the others have made their move, we can't just sit around either. Han Shuo chuckled coldly as the murderous aura around him grew thicker. The evil and merciless expression from before once again appeared on his face. Honorable Master, what should I do? Gilbert was excited once again. His dragon-shaped voice was loud and resonant. Carry the 2 of them and fly above the valley. Do your best to destroy all the buildings in the valley, and spit out all the poison and flames. Immediately fly away from the Valley of Sunshine if you encounter any attacks that might harm you. Don't wait for me, no one can stop me if I want to leave. Han Shuo's expression was cold and savage as he laughed wildly and dove down like a hawk. A bloody light flickered from his body as his eyes turned blood red. He'll be fine, right? When Han Shuo had flown down, Phoebe had already discovered Han Shuo's strangeness and couldn't help but ask Emily. Do as he says. Emily responded and stomped her foot, urging Gilbert, Dark Dragon, what are you waiting for? A small, skinny figure followed Han Shuo at this moment and floated down through the air. The little skeleton flailed his arms and legs as he flew down, like a kite with a broken string. However, the 7-bone spurs on his back swayed back and forth midway, stabilizing his swaying body. He followed closely behind Han Shuo in a strange trajectory as he descended into the mountain valley. Chapter 2:15. In the bloodthirsty realm, demonic cultivators were extremely easily angered and irritable. Only in the midst of bloodthirsty slaughter could one comprehend the mysteries of this realm. Only in the midst of bloodthirsty slaughter could a demonic cultivator clearly understand themselves. If one wanted to break through this realm, endless slaughter was the fastest way. However, it was extremely easy for demonic practitioners to go berserk in the midst of slaughter. If one wasn't careful and lost control of their mind, it would be difficult to recover, and they would completely devolve into a lunatic monster that only had the instinct to kill. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to control one's self in this realm. Slaughter was the fastest way to break through, but it could also be a path of no return. When Han Shuo had flown down from the cliff, his hatred towards Florida had increased immeasurably, including the female archer called Maxine, who had almost dealt a fatal blow to Emily. His heart, which had calmed down, now beat much faster than usual. His magical yuan was abundant, and the demon infant was filled with a surging vitality. After the demon infant had absorbed the pure power of the soul contained within the purple demon eye, Han Shuo's stagnant true demon realm had broken through. Although Han Shuo had thoughts of going on a killing spree from time to time after reaching the bloodlust realm, his strength had indeed increased by leaps and bounds. Now, even if Florida was at his peak, Han Shuo still had the confidence to kill him head-on. Even if he didn't make use of the speed of the art of the demonic ninth heavens, Han Shuo was confident that he could fight Edwin and escape unscathed. A murderous aura appeared in the form of a dense black mist, curling around Han Shuo's body. The swooping Han Shuo looked like a black cloud from afar as he dove down. There were 2 blood-red eyes within the cloud, and the eerie, sinister light within was enough to make one's heart tremble. At this moment, Tunai Mountain had long since fallen into chaos due to Edwin and Belinda's actions. Edwin and Belinda had joined hands and were dealing a destructive blow to the magnificent building, seeming to want to raze it to the ground. From Harris's scroll, Han Shuo knew that the magnificent building was where Florida of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band lived. It looked like Edwin's trip to the Cairo Mercenary Band had been fruitful. Without Loridan's help, the 2 who'd just arrived in the Valley of Sunshine wouldn't have been so familiar with the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band's setup. Amidst the deafening rumbling sounds, a pitch-black shadow descended from the sky. A baleful aura was so dense that no one dared to ignore it. The experts of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band had been frantically gathering their men to deal with Edwin and Selena when they discovered the abnormality in the sky. Arrows, spears, and javelins had already shot into the sky like lightning bolts. However, none of the dozens of attacks that shot towards the Black Shadow could get close to it. The Black Shadow quickly chanted a necromancy spell as it flew down. A black light flashed through the sky as a troop of gargoyles appeared out of thin air. These gargoyles wielded bone spears and lined up neatly in front of the Black Shadow. They tightly blocked the arrows, spears, and javelins. Suddenly, a huge jet-black sky curtain rapidly unfolded behind the black figure, blocking the bright moonlight and causing a third of the entire valley to be shrouded in darkness. A thick aura of death suddenly spread out endlessly. Everyone within the aura of death felt that their bodies were a lot more stiff than usual. The Black Shadow landed in the mountain valley under the cover of the black canopy, and dark creatures appeared one after another. The moonlight was covered by the dark blue clouds, making it impossible to judge the time. No one knew how much longer it would be until daybreak. As a lost necromancy spell, the canopy of necromancy had the effect of diminishing the fighting strength of enemies within its range. Within the range of the canopy of necromancy, all dark creatures could obtain more power and possess greater speed and strength through absorbing the thick aura of death around them. This was an evil spell that reduced the opponent's strength and increased the fighting strength of dark creatures. It had been forgotten on the continent after it had disappeared from the cemetery of death. When Han Shua's spell appeared and the dark creatures began to excitedly attack their surroundings, not only did the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries lose their agility, their eyes also felt abnormally dry and their vision was affected. Belinda, which other necromancer has come apart from Clarendon? Edwin had been casting dark magic when he saw that the moonlight had been covered by the dark blue clouds and the dark creatures were excitedly attacking the mercenaries around them. He asked Belinda, who was controlling the golem beside him. Shaking her head, Belinda had a face full of confusion as she responded, "Clarendon has already been taken care of. There shouldn't be any other necromancers apart from him." Edwin started when he heard these words and then smiled faintly. "Then perhaps the higher-ups have sent someone else over. Even I've never seen such a mysterious necromancy spell before. I don't think any other necromancer can use it apart from our Calamity Church. Of course, only our Calamity Church would possess such mysterious necromancy magic. He must be one of us." Belinda believed Edwin's words without a shred of doubt. It looked like they had an unreasonable amount of confidence in the Calamity Church's strength. "I'm Edwin, which old friend has come?" Edwin, who had been casting dark magic, couldn't help but call out in a friendly manner when he saw that some dark creatures were helping the two of them block the mercenaries around them because of Han Shua's appearance. A vast amount of mental strength had been mostly used up because of the canopy of necromancy and the summoning of 50 to 60 dark creatures of different levels. As the 50 to 60 dark creatures wantonly attacked everything within the range of the canopy of necromancy, Han Shua, who'd sunk into a berserk state of bloodlust, became a cruel shadow that wantonly vented his rage. A thirst for blood pushed Han Shua into the midst of endless slaughter like the unending river waters. The mercenaries who weren't strong enough were instantly cut in half by the sharp demon's lair edge wherever the dark shadow passed, fresh blood spurting out. Han Shua's eyes had turned blood red, and he couldn't control his desire to destroy everything. He killed all who stood in his way, like a machine reaping lives. All the mercenaries in the surroundings were met with terrifying attacks one after another. Han Shua's body froze slightly when he heard Edwin's friendly words, but he ignored him. When he looked around, he discovered that there was no one else apart from the little skull following closely behind him. In the bloodlust realm, Han Shua's physical strength had reached the pinnacle. He could instinctively sense the dangers around him amidst the continuous slaughter. He could even clearly sense the fear and trembling of those far away. Every time Han Shua killed a person, the person's fear and resentment at death's door would form a ball of air that was hard to see with the naked eye, and be absorbed by the killing intent around Han Shua. As more and more mercenaries were killed by Han Shua, the killing intent around Han Shua's body grew thicker and thicker, to the point that the thick scent of blood emanated from his pores. Han Shua's physical body and magical yuan seemed to be continuously refined in this process. Han Shua could feel that his strength was increasing bit by bit in this process. On the contrary, as his physical body and magical yuan rapidly increased, Han Shua's mind became more and more muddled. When the fear and resentment of those he'd killed were absorbed into his surroundings, the enormous amount of information seemed to affect Han Shua's brain, causing the veins on Han Shua's head to bulge. He felt as if he was about to go berserk. Cursing inwardly, Han Shua immediately understood after obtaining all of Chu Kanglin's memories that in the bloodlust realm, if there were such muddled signs in one's mind, the desire to kill everyone and destroy everything in their surroundings would increase. This was a sign that one was about to go berserk. After experiencing hundreds of times of pain, Han Shua's indomitable willpower had long since been tempered into indomitable willpower. The Demon's Lair edge was forcibly put away into Han Shua's storage ring. Han Shua took advantage of the fact that he was still conscious to continuously calm his raging heart and immediately sat down cross-legged, ignoring the chaos in his surroundings. Little Skull, who had been following beside Han Shua and helping Han Shua reap lives, suddenly flashed his purple demon eye when he saw Han Shua suddenly sit down. He waved his hand at the dark creatures in the distance. Like a broken light bulb, the purple demon eye flickered and lit up with an evil purple light. It was as if a mysterious force was driving those dark creatures. When Little Skull waved his hand, the surrounding zombies and hate warriors all walked over in fear and trepidation, as if they were subordinates showing due respect to Little Skull. When facing Han Shua, because of the summoning incantation, they could only rigidly and instinctively follow Han Shua's orders. However, when Han Shua sat down cross-legged and Little Skull summoned them, their expressions were filled with fear and reverence. Each and every one of them carefully surrounded Han Shua, as if deeply afraid that Little Skull would be dissatisfied and blame them. They were like the most humble servants and slaves. This kind of behavior seemed to indicate that they had long since known of Little Skull, or had heard of Little Skull's tyrannical and miraculous abilities. Otherwise, how could an ordinary Little Skull warrior in this vast and boundless alternate dimension make them treat him with such fear? Perhaps, in another dimension infinitely far away, the Little Skull with 7 bone spurs on his back, a bone dagger in his hand, and a purple demon eye had already established a school of his own and become a famous character. Chapter 2:16. A third of the mountain valley was covered by the canopy of necromancy. Dark green clouds obscured all light as a thick aura of death wafted in all directions, giving the mercenaries within a strong sense of discomfort. In the center of the canopy of necromancy, Han Shua, who'd experienced slaughter and found it hard to control his desires, couldn't stop his mind from sinking into a frenzy of slaughter due to the increasingly thick aura of violence in his body. However, his will, which had been tempered for a long time, was able to rein in at the most critical moment, forcefully stopping him from falling any further. Sitting down cross-legged, Han Shua ignored the chaos around him and focused, slowly pacifying his deepest desires. 3 zombie warriors, 2 hate warriors, and 7 or 8 skeletal warriors stood around Han Shua. Little Skull wielded a bone dagger as his purple demon eye glowed with purple light. He was like a general leading an army of thousands as he stood in front of Han Shua with his head held high and chest puffed out, silently protecting Han Shua. Under the combined efforts of Edwin and Belinda, the grandest building in the mountain valley finally collapsed with a boom. The earth-shattering sound shook the entire mountain valley. In that moment, the mercenaries of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band stationed far away, meditating or tirelessly training their swordplay, all realized that their base was under attack and swarmed towards the mountain valley. In the far distance, a group of knights clad in shining silver armor was charging towards them from atop their silver-armored warhorses. They were holding 3-meter-long javelins in their hands. A slender blue figure nimbly stepped onto the treetops on the snow-covered treetops, belatedly flying over. She wore a loose blue dress with a few fluttering ribbons that covered her face as she moved quickly. Only 2 long pointed ears were visible, revealing her identity as an elf. In another direction, Andy and the Thunder Archmage used the levitation spell under the moonlight to come to the rescue as fast as lightning, unable to disguise the panic on their faces. Who dares cause trouble for the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band? An angry roar shook the skies as the person at the front of the silver-armored knights roared out. Although his head was covered by a silver helmet, his roar still spread throughout the entire mountain valley. "The Knights of Light are here, it looks like we should retreat." Belinda looked into the distance and spoke to Edwin beside her. Edwin nodded and was about to reply when he suddenly pointed at the sky in surprise. Who is that?" Belinda couldn't help but look up in the direction of Edwin's finger. Although the canopy of necromancy was concealing them, the two of them still managed to make out an enormous black figure through the surging flames. "It's that person's magical pet, a young black dragon. I didn't think that they'd come here as well." Belinda seemed to recall the humiliation she'd suffered earlier, and her voice was slightly gloomy as she replied. "Hee, that's great. We don't have to leave immediately." If it hadn't been for Gilbert's group, then all of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band's attacks would have been aimed at them. Now that they had Gilbert to divert attention, the two of them naturally didn't have to bear all the pressure. In the air above the mountain valley, Gilbert made use of his swift flight speed to carry Emily and Phoebe on his back as he spat out scorching flames at the buildings below, drowning them in a sea of fire. Green venom sprayed out from some crowded areas, and the mercenaries all howled as they dodged in all directions. If they didn't make it in time and came into contact with even the slightest bit of the venom, they would die in an instant. "Lowly life forms, you shouldn't have angered us. This is Gilbert's, punishment for your despicable actions." Gilbert's deep voice reverberated through the air above the mountain valley. He was so excited that he was dancing with joy, proud of his astonishing destructive power. "Holy power of light, hear my call and dispel all darkness, radiance of light." An ancient and distant chant suddenly rang out in the chaotic mountain valley. All sorts of shouts and attacks were unable to drown out this chant. A strong beam of light tore through the heavens as the divine, holy element of light filled the air above the mountain valley. The dark green clouds created by the canopy of necromancy all disintegrated in an instant, vanishing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Dazzling light sprinkled all over the mountain valley, reflecting the gentle light of the stars. The holy power of light sprinkled down and quickly dispersed the presence of death. All the mercenaries in the mountain valley were no longer affected by it. Of the dark creatures summoned by Han Shua, apart from the little skull who remained calm and unafraid, the other dark creatures of various ranks had their bodies rapidly corroded in an extremely short period of time. Each and every one of them revealed an expression of extreme agony as they frantically looked for cover to hide. The dark creatures that had originally been ordered by the little skull to protect Han Shua were also in great pain, but they seemed to be very afraid of the little skull. Although their bodies were rapidly corroding, they didn't dare to leave immediately. Instead, they looked at the little skull with wide eyes, waiting for the little skull's forgiveness. Finally, the little skull waved his hand, and the dark creatures scattered with a crash. Each and every one of them hid under a house or found a random hole to burrow into, trying to avoid the radiance of radiance. As for the injured mercenaries, their injuries miraculously came under control after being illuminated by the radiance of radiance. Their spirits visibly improved, as if they'd been quickly healed. When the element of light filled the mountain valley, the situation was reversed in an instant. A white-haired but spirited old man dressed as a clergyman of the Church of Light surveyed Tanai's surroundings with a bemoaning gaze. "He's here all right. I guessed that he'd come back after Florida was so heavily injured. Let's go, Florida must have been moved away by him. Otherwise, the building he lives in wouldn't have so little defense." Edwin stood in the shadows of a house and looked viciously at Light Archmage Ferguson in the air as he yelled at Belinda. It'll be hard to leave if we're any later." Belinda understood just how strong Ferguson was and didn't hesitate at all. The golem had already turned into a streak of white light as soon as she'd finished speaking, disappearing into her scroll. On the other side, Dark Dragon Gilbert, who had just been shouting loudly, didn't utter a single word when he saw that the old man had turned the situation around with a powerful spell of light the moment he appeared. He quickly flew up into the sky without saying a word. Ferguson frowned at Gilbert's departure and chanted the simplest spell, Radiant Sword Slash. The enormous amount of light surrounding the mountain valley suddenly coalesced into 3 swords of light, shooting towards Gilbert with great speed. He turned around and spat out a stream of flames, stopping the two swords of light in their tracks. Emily hastily cast a hand of death to block the other sword of light, and the dragon and two women leapt out of the mountain valley, disappearing into the distance. After Ferguson released the lightsaber slash, a fierce light magic shockwave took shape. This magic shockwave took the form of a ring-shaped wave. Wherever it passed, the air would crackle and the ground would crack, leaving deep scratches on it. A building that occupied an area of 50 square meters was instantly crushed into rubble under the bombardment of this shockwave. Stone fragments flew everywhere. "Old friend Edwin, I could smell that disgusting scent on you from far away. Come out." Ferguson called out softly in the direction of the attack after casting the blast of light magic. It looked like Gilbert wasn't Ferguson's main target, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to leave so easily. Edwin, who was of the same level and was quite familiar with each other, should be Ferguson's main target. "Heh, I'm so happy to see you, but this place isn't suitable for me. Goodbye." Edwin's sinister laughter rang out from within the ruins. A black figure gradually faded away after his voice faded, disappearing from the ruins. "I'll find you." Ferguson's face was calm and he didn't look happy or sad. His voice was also indifferent, devoid of anger or anger. "There's another one down there. There's someone who's not afraid of death." Thunder Archmage Asa looked down in surprise and exclaimed. In the middle of a mountain valley filled with rubble, a figure glowing with a bloody light sat there indifferently. He was as steady as a boulder, as if he didn't care about everything that was happening around him. A short little skull with a purple left eye, wielding a bone dagger, 7 spikes on his back, and wielding a bone dagger stood unwaveringly by his side, as if protecting him from danger. "It's him, this is the person who almost killed Florida in front of the Valley of Sunshine's fence." Fire Archmage Andy immediately cried out when he looked down. Everyone was shocked when they heard these words. All of them looked at Han Shua in confusion. They couldn't understand why Han Shua hadn't left at this time. Could it be that he thought he could take on all the experts of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band by himself? Could it be that he didn't know that there was a Light Grand Magus in the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band? "Surround him, I want him alive." There was finally a trace of anger in Ferguson's voice. No one knew if he was angry at Han Shua for heavily injuring Florida, or at Han Shua for looking down on all of them. Understood. The Knights of Light immediately surged forward from all directions upon hearing Ferguson's order, surrounding Han Shua in 3 layers. In the sky were the 2 Archmages Andy and Asa, as well as the Light Grand Magus Ferguson and the female archer Maxine. Only a sacred Magus, a sacred knight, or a sacred swordmaster would be able to leave so easily when surrounded by such a force. Han Shua obviously wasn't one of these peak existences. As everyone stared at Han Shua, Light Grand Magus Ferguson's eyes suddenly lit up with an astonishing light. His previously calm face was suddenly filled with a strange expression. His white brow was furrowed tightly, the wrinkles on his forehead twitching as his lips smacked together. His expression was filled with incredulity and shock, as well as a few traces of deep worry and fear. "Grandpa Ferguson, what's wrong?" The female elven archer Maxine looked oddly at Ferguson from not too far away. Her exquisite and impeccable face was like the most perfect work of art. Maxine's appearance possessed all the advantages that an elven beauty should have. She had a slender and alluring figure, an extraordinary temperament, silky hair that was like a waterfall of oil green, and a breathtakingly beautiful face. All of these perfectly blended together to form a beauty that could topple cities of the elven race. On the other side, Edwin and Belinda stood side by side on a cliff above the valley where Han Shua and the Dark Dragon had been standing. The expression on the Calamity Church's Dark Grand Magus Edwin's face was astonishingly similar to Ferguson's. A frightening dark light shone from his eyes and focused on the little skull wielding the bone dagger. His expression was one of incredulity and shock, as if he'd found a priceless treasure. His lips trembled uncontrollably. "Grandmaster Edwin, what's wrong?" Belinda looked at Edwin with a baffled expression and asked the exact same question that Maxine had asked Ferguson. "That little skull, he's not afraid of the radiance of light." Ferguson and Edwin exclaimed almost at the same time with different emotions in their hearts. I don't know how this person did it, but he must die now. He can't stay in this world for a second longer. This was the first time in so many years that Ferguson had made up his mind to kill someone. There was an unquestionable resolution in his words. On the other side, Edwin took a deep breath and said with wild joy, he must live no matter what. Light magic has always been the bane of necromancy magic for thousands of years. If the dark creatures of the necromancy magic can be unafraid of light magic, then the Calamity Church will completely reverse the situation. The Church of Light will find it difficult to stop our advance. Belinda immediately came to her senses when she heard these words. Her eyes were also filled with shock and joy. She looked at Edwin and said, "What should we do? We must save him at all costs. He must not die." Edwin said resolutely. He had never wanted to protect someone as much as he did at this moment. Chapter 2:17. Knights of Light, kill them immediately. This person and that dark creature cannot be allowed to remain in this world. Ferguson's expression was grave as he called out lowly. The Knights of Light who had just surrounded Han Shoa and had been planning on capturing Han Shoa alive were all a bit surprised when they heard that Ferguson had suddenly changed his mind. However, they only paused for a second and then decided to carry out Ferguson's orders obediently. Edwin didn't hesitate at the top of the cliff at the top of the mountain valley as he flew towards Han Shoa with Belinda. He planned on saving Han Shoa at all costs and finding out the secret behind why dark creatures didn't fear light magic. At this moment, Han Shoa, who had been keeping his eyes closed all this time, suddenly opened his eyes. His cold gaze swept across the surroundings, revealing a strange smile. Han Shoa chanted the simplest necromancy magic and the little skull that had been guarding him without abandoning him disappeared without a trace under a streak of black light that cut through the sky. Goodbye everyone. Han Shoa smiled faintly after the little skull had disappeared. As soon as he'd finished speaking, the murderous bloody light that had been circling around Han Shoa's body suddenly shot into the 9 heavens. A powerful explosion sounded from Han Shoa's direction. Violent explosions rang out one after another with Han Shoa at the center. The earth quaked and the mountains swayed as even the mountain valley trembled. Some of the Knights of Light who had been close to Han Shoa were caught off guard and were blasted into smithereens, blood and flesh flying far away. Edwin and Belinda, who had been rapidly descending, were startled when they saw the sudden commotion below them. Waves of evil blood-red light shot towards them in the sky, accompanied by violent booms. Their downward momentum came to a halt at this moment. Edwin used the levitation spell to grab Belinda and scrambled to avoid the blood light that shot into the sky. He then looked down at the violent changes below, his face full of shock and disbelief. When the dust had settled, an enormous hole that was 5 to 6 meters deep and 10 meters wide had appeared where Han Shoa had been sitting. The strong smell of blood, accompanied by the dark red air mass, drifted in all directions. The scorched ground was pitch black, and there were several badly mutilated corpses of the Knights of Light, just at the edge of the huge cave. However, Han Shoa, who had been sitting cross-legged here, had disappeared without a trace. No matter how much the crowd gnashed their teeth and searched everywhere, they couldn't find any trace of him. Taking a deep breath, Light Grand Magus Ferguson suppressed his anger and said, "There's no need to look. Although I don't know how he did it, he's already left. Then what do we do next?" Thunder Archmage Asa had been very respectful when facing Ferguson and asked hastily. "I want to know everything about this person, everything. The more detailed, the faster the better." Ferguson's voice held a rare note of anxiety as he turned his head to Asa and urged. "Understood, we'll get to it immediately." Asa responded. The elven sharpshooter Maxine finally understood why Ferguson had lost his composure. The sudden appearance of such a person who could turn the tables on the continent was a nightmarish influence for the Church of Light. Therefore, as an important figure of the Church of Light, Ferguson would certainly make use of all his resources to nip this possibility in the bud. "Good kid, you do have some tricks up your sleeve to be able to escape so miraculously." It was a good thing that Edwin had stopped his descent in time, otherwise he might have been caught up in the blast as well. Edwin couldn't help but praise Han Shuo when he saw that Han Shuo had miraculously escaped. Master Edwin, this person has a grudge against the Calamity Church. Clarendon died at his hands, and even Johnny was killed by him. Belinda couldn't help but remind him when she saw Edwin's attitude take a 180-degree turn. As long as he's willing to work with us, this kind of grudge is nothing. Everyone has a weakness. No matter what this person needs, we can provide it for him. In addition, Ferguson has already discovered his uniqueness today. The Radiant Church will definitely try to kill him at all costs. Ferguson will help us and get him to cooperate with us. Edwin laughed heartily and grabbed Belinda as they flew higher and higher, gradually leaving the mountain valley. There was a deep pond with a thick layer of ice 100 or so miles away from the mountain valley where the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries were. The water in the pond had all been frozen solid in the harsh winter, and the surface of the pond was as smooth as a mirror, shining brightly under the starlight. However, a streak of bloody light streaked through the sky and descended from the heavens, crashing down like a meteor. A violent force suddenly attacked, and the glaring bloody light bombarded the solid ice. A huge explosion came from the solid ice of the deep pool. The originally smooth mirror-like ice layer was suddenly blasted open with a huge hole in the ice. With the hole in the ice as the center, the surrounding ice cracked and melted into the pool of water below. A slender figure suddenly shot out from the hole in the ice in the span of a breath. A dripping wet Han Shuo flew out of the hole and immediately stopped on a piece of ice that hadn't cracked. He immediately sat down cross-legged and continued to adjust his breathing. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Han Shuo opened his eyes and called out softly. Thin threads of dark red air floated out from the pores in his body, gradually dissipating as the cold wind blew past. In the dead of the winter night, Han Shuo stood up from his cross-legged position, changed into a new set of dry clothes, and soared into the sky once more. When he arrived in the boundless night sky, he got his bearings and quickly flew towards the Valley of Sunshine. The Ninefold Demonic Art. With all of Chu Kanglin's memories of demonic arts, Han Shuo could already skillfully use some secret magical arts now that he'd reached the Bloodlust realm. The demonic blood escape art was a type of demonic art for escaping. It originally required one to use one's blood essence to activate it and expend a bit of it to create a series of explosions. Then, the user would use the loud explosions and chaos to teleport their body away from danger. However, unless it was absolutely necessary, demonic cultivators definitely wouldn't use such a technique that consumed a large amount of blood essence. This was because once this technique was used, the caster would definitely suffer a great loss of vitality due to the excessive consumption of blood essence. This would put them in an extremely disadvantageous situation. However, this wasn't the case when he deployed the demonic blood disassembly this time. Having reached the Bloodlust realm, Han Shuo's body had naturally formed a murderous aura after a short period of bloodthirsty slaughter in the valley. He'd absorbed the fear and hatred of the mercenaries who died at his hands and gathered it all into his body. When this force grew stronger and stronger, Han Shuo felt that he was struggling to control his body. This was why he disregarded everything and sat down cross-legged in a dangerous place, immediately recovering his mind. In the process of stabilizing his mind, Han Shuo suddenly woke up and realized that he was surrounded by many experts. At this moment, the negative energy that had been attached to the killing intent on his body was extremely chaotic and difficult to control. In this moment of crisis, Han Shuo suddenly thought of the demonic blood escape art. A thought struck him and he forcefully used this energy as a catalyst, using it as the foundation to execute the demonic blood escape art. Not only did this cause an earth-shattering commotion, a few knights who were caught off guard instantly died tragically. Han Shuo also calmly left the encirclement of the experts. This uncontrollable energy was also released by Han Shuo, not harming him in the slightest. On the way back to the Valley of Sunshine, Han Shuo miraculously discovered that the strength of his body had been tempered once again through this slaughter. Perhaps it was because the demonic blood escape art had used up the chaotic energy, leaving behind a small amount of pure energy that had miraculously fused with his magical yuan. It looks like I'll have to take risks if I want to improve a bit faster. When Han Shuo sensed that his body's condition had changed due to this slaughter, he couldn't help but murmur ruefully. The sound of metal clashing suddenly traveled from not too far away and fell into Han Shuo's ears. Han Shuo, who was flying towards the Valley of Sunshine, started and began to carefully discern the surrounding mountain terrain. Having his brain expanded by magical yuan, Han Shuo had a good understanding of the surrounding mountain terrain from the information Emily had obtained. When he paid close attention to his surroundings, he quickly found out where he was. He even knew where the sound was coming from. The sound of metal clashing came from where the house of Menlo was. Perhaps this matter had something to do with Trunks and the others. It's time to see the strength of those subordinates I've never met before. Han Shuo murmured to himself as he changed his trajectory in the direction of the Valley of Sunshine and flew towards the area where the house of Menlo was. Chapter 218. The house of Menlo was located in a small mountain in the Valley of Sunshine. Many caves had been excavated into the belly of the mountain, intersecting with each other. Many shockingly powerful defensive measures had been set up inside. Han Shuo flew through the air and stopped on top of an ancient tree more than 10 meters tall. His eyes looked towards the source of the noise. Thick smoke billowed out of the caves where the house of Menlo's troops were stationed. Some of the caves' entrances were ablaze. Many stone chambers had been excavated from the caves. The stone chambers were like individual rooms, with all sorts of living facilities within. Many of the stone chambers were even more luxurious than some of the shops in the Valley of Sunshine. It was very normal for a fire dragon to burst into flames as soon as it was thrown in. At the exit of the small mountain, a group of masked people moved quickly. Some of them were fire mages who chanted fire spells from time to time and spat out tongues of flame towards the cave entrance. This group of people moved nimbly and cooperated very well. The fire mages set the fire while the wind mages used the wind to fan the flames. A few archers wielded bows and arrows and forced the house of Menlo's men who had poked their heads out of the cave to go back in. The small mountain covered a large area. After the originally empty belly of the mountain was excavated, many caves and stone chambers of various sizes appeared. This group of troublemakers only targeted one corner of the mountain to destroy. Once people from other places came to help, they immediately retreated and hid in the surrounding bushes to conceal themselves. They were obviously very familiar with the surrounding terrain, and they were very good at changing places after a battle. Once they were discovered, they would immediately retreat while fighting, then make a big circle and come back from another place to wreak havoc for a while. Under normal circumstances, this group of troublemakers with only a few dozen people would very likely be consigned to eternal damnation when the first wave of attacks was discovered and they didn't retreat. However, the House of Menlo's situation was also very chaotic. This group of troublemakers was not the main force this time. A group of 400 to 500 bandits with messy clothing was the main target of the House of Menlo. For some unknown reason, these bandits had gathered around the house of Menlo and attacked any house of Menlo who came out of the cave. Both sides were locked in a fierce battle. Watching from afar for a while, Han Shuo didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw Trunks and his gang taking advantage of the chaotic battle to cause trouble everywhere. He hadn't expected that Trunks would actually have such talent in this area. The mission against the House of Menlo this time was originally just to arouse the House of Menlo's suspicions of the other factions. Who would have thought that the situation would develop like this? This was rather surprising to Han Shuo. Even more people were wearing shining armor and wielding sharp weapons as they returned from a distant path. From their clothing, Han Shuo could clearly tell that this group was also from the House of Menlo. There were about 500 to 600 of them, and each of them had an extraordinary aura. They should be the elite troops of the House of Menlo. The direction in which this group of people were returning was precisely where Trunks and his men were. Seeing that Trunks and his men hadn't discovered any possible danger, and were planning on causing more trouble, Han Shuo finally no longer stayed where he was and flew towards them. The sky was already beginning to brighten, and the stars had hidden themselves in the depths of the sky. It looked like it would be dawn soon. Just as Trunks was about to launch one last attack during the chaos, a black shadow landed in front of him with a whoosh. Trunks was startled, but when he realized that it was actually Han Shua, he immediately let out a sigh of relief and said, "Why are you here?" "I was passing by here on the way and just happened to see the returning elites of the House of Menlo, so I was planning to come in from here." "Let's leave quickly." Han Shua smiled faintly and didn't waste any words, explaining the current situation to Trunks. When he heard that the elites of the House of Menlo had returned, Trunks growled lowly and made a gesture towards the mercenaries in the distance. They were all masked fellows. When they saw Trunks' hand signal, they immediately understood. They did not gather together and leave. Instead, they became more and more scattered. Each and every one of them used the terrain to conceal themselves and gradually disappeared without a trace. "Let's go." Trunks didn't remain idle either. He turned his head and smiled at Han Shua before burrowing into the dense thicket. The thick snow on the towering ancient trees blocked the light from above. It was difficult to walk through the dense thicket, but Trunks' figure wasn't obstructed at all. He led Han Shua through many winding paths and left the House of Menlo's mountain in half an hour, appearing on the road to the Valley of Sunshine. They're all old mercenaries of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. When the old chief was still here, everything around the Valley of Sunshine was under our control. We're so familiar with the surrounding terrain that we can walk around with our eyes closed, so you don't have to worry about their safety. Trunks explained to Han Shua once they left the House of Menlo's mountain. Han Shua had already observed these people's actions from the high ground just now. They had great teamwork and were quite strong. Most of them had the strength of journeyman swordsmen or knights. There were also a few adept mages and swordsmen among them. There were also many with extraordinary archery skills. It looked like it was indeed as Trunks had said, they really were old mercenaries of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. With such a group of people, in addition to Trunks' planning and organization, the Soul Destroyer Mercenary Band's future path would be much smoother. "Right, what's going on your side? Why did a bandit band come to the House of Menlo?" Han Shua couldn't help but ask as he recalled the situation just now. Trunks couldn't help but laugh at Han Shua's question. He then explained, "When we were heading to the House of Menlo, we coincidentally saw this bandit band planning to rob a group of merchants. Before the battle, we pointed the way for these merchants and they followed our directions to hide in the House of Menlo. In the end, they alerted the House of Menlo and the bandits started fighting with the House of Menlo. We took advantage of the chaos to cause trouble everywhere. We originally thought that this group of bandits would be immediately defeated and we had already made plans to retreat. Who would have thought that the elites of the House of Menlo would be transferred out of the mountain tonight? We don't know what they were going to do." When the bandits saw that there weren't any more elites of the House of Menlo coming out to attack them, they arrogantly continued to attack. We also took advantage of the situation and stayed for a while longer. You saw what happened afterwards. So that's how it is. Are there many such bandit factions in the mountain range surrounding the Valley of Sunshine? Han Shua nodded and asked with a smile. Of course. It's precisely because the Valley of Sunshine is in the middle of 3 countries that many large merchants want to do business in the Valley of Sunshine. That's why there are many bandit factions in the surrounding area. There are even 2 bandit bands with thousands of people. They were formed by wanted criminals from the 3 countries. The leaders of these 2 bandit bands are a man and a woman. The man is called Gustav, nicknamed the Butcher. He's an infamous wanted criminal in the Kasi Empire. He kills without batting an eyelid and is extremely cruel and cold-blooded. If a caravan were to run into his bandit band, it would truly be bad luck. He would plunder all the normal goods and take all the beauties. If he's in a bad mood, he'll kill the rest without leaving a single survivor. Back then, Florida worked with Gustav to frame our old chief, causing him to meet with misfortune. Even my little sister went missing with him. I'll kill this Gustav sooner or later. There's also a woman called Janet. This woman should be considered to have inherited her father's business. Her father was a bandit, her grandfather was a bandit, and her great-grandfather was also a bandit. they're from a famous bandit clan near the Valley of Sunshine. She was raised to be a bandit from birth. Although this woman isn't a good person, she still abides by the rules. When her bandit band runs into merchants, their lives are usually not in danger as long as they don't resist. Apart from the two largest bandit bands controlled by these two, there are still a dozen or so bandit factions of various sizes in the surrounding Valley of Sunshine. It's just that the remaining ones are a bit smaller in scale and aren't as famous or powerful as these two, Trunks slowly explained to Han Shua. Han Shua listened for a while and carefully inquired about the strength of those bandit bands before nodding. It looks like the glorious Tanai bandits and mercenaries complement each other. Whether it's bandits or mercenaries, they're both indispensable. What do you mean? Trunks asked. Without bandits, merchants won't need protection, and mercenaries won't be able to make money. Without mercenaries, merchants won't dare to come here to do business, and bandits won't have anything to steal. Therefore, it's completely reasonable for both bandits and mercenaries to exist in the Valley of Sunshine. With the strength of the four factions in the Valley of Sunshine, they should have the power to exterminate these bandits. However, perhaps it's because they understand this that they didn't make a move and allowed the bandits to exist. Han Shua smiled faintly as he explained. Trunks chuckled when he heard Han Shua's words. That's right, the old chief understood this long ago. I didn't think you'd figure it out so quickly as well. Nodding, Han Shua looked at the sky and said, let's go, it's getting late. Let's hurry back to the Valley of Sunshine. I also want to go take a look. Ever since the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band had left, Han Shua had always felt a voice calling out to him from afar. Han Shua had originally thought that the little skull had run into danger again, but he realized that something wasn't right after a bit of careful observation. It wasn't until later on that Han Shua focused his attention and carefully sensed that the voice was coming from the dark forest. This place wasn't very far from the dark forest, and the Cemetery of Death was in the dark forest. When Han Shua realized that the call seemed to be coming from the dark forest, he immediately understood that the Earth Elite zombie had successfully broken out of the ground. However, due to the boundary of the Cemetery of Death, he couldn't use his senses to find Han Shua, so he could only passively send out signals. Chapter 219. Han Shua and Trunks returned to the Valley of Sunshine one after the other. Gilbert, Emily, and Phoebe had already returned to the shop with the place of extreme water. They were anxiously waiting for Han Shua, afraid that something had happened to Han Shua. Are you alright? Who would have thought that old fellow Ferguson would also be in the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band? It's a good thing that his main target wasn't us, otherwise Gilbert and we wouldn't have been able to return so easily. Emily sighed with lingering fear when she saw that Han Shua had returned safely. Ferguson seems to care quite a bit about this grandson of his. The Rainbow Sickle mercenary band suffered heavy casualties tonight, they definitely won't take this lying down. Let's be careful. Han Shua understood that the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band wasn't weak. The reason why the valley had been so chaotic this time was because the experts weren't in Tanai. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to cause such a ruckus so easily. What happened afterwards? Phoebe and the other two had left early and didn't know what had happened afterwards. When she saw that Han Shua had returned safely, Phoebe couldn't help but ask. Nothing important. I took advantage of the chaos to escape after you guys left. Han Shua responded. Heartfelt calls traveled from the distant dark forest and circled around Han Shua's heart. Seeing that there wasn't much to explain, Han Shua couldn't hold back his curiosity and immediately said, there shouldn't be any problems during the day. Everyone has been busy all night, let's rest a bit before the sky brightens. Han Shua hastily returned to his room after speaking and chanted an incantation. The loyal little skull appeared in front of him, bone dagger in hand. After giving the order, Han Shua took out the magic staff that led to the Cemetery of Death and assembled the magical formation. He hastily walked into the formation and activated it with his mental strength. A dazzling white light flashed by, and the scene changed drastically in an instant. Walking out of the main hall of the Cemetery of Death, One could see mounds of earth rising from the ground as far as the eye could see. Under the dusky sky, dense earth elements continuously gathered at the place of extreme earth. Like the undulating waves of the sea, the ground trembled slightly. Mounds rose and fell one after another, and the hard soil became as soft as sand. In the middle of the deep hole, the soil was constantly churning, as if there was a big loach rolling around inside. The cemetery of death was protected by a special boundary. Anyone who wanted to enter or exit the cemetery of death would have to open it with the eye of darkness that Han Shuo possessed. As soon as the Earth Elite Zombie had successfully emerged, it had instinctively searched for traces of Han Shuo. It just so happened that the Valley of Sunshine where Han Shuo resided wasn't too far from the dark forest. Therefore, when it sensed Han Shuo's presence, it immediately wanted to approach Han Shuo. Unfortunately, it was blocked by the special boundary of the Cemetery of Death and had no way of leaving. Therefore, it impatiently stirred up the earth, seeming to want to use its special ability to leave through the earth. However, it was obvious that this mysterious place, the Cemetery of Death, did indeed have its own special and mysterious aspects. As the favored child of the Earth Elite Zombie, who could move through the earth at will, was actually unable to break through this restriction. This was enough to prove that the Cemetery of Death, as the holy land of necromancers, truly lived up to its name of mystery. Come out. When Han Shuo appeared, he immediately called out softly. As soon as he finished speaking, a yellowish shadow suddenly broke out from the center of the sand and stood straight in front of Han Shuo. It was still the same ordinary zombie warrior, but its appearance had undergone tremendous changes after undergoing the refinement of the demonic arts. First of all, the originally dark green skin on its face had turned yellowish-brown, and its entire body was covered in an oily yellow armor. Faint light flowed from the surface of the armor, and dense earth chi overflowed from it. This oily yellow armor had been slowly formed after the Earth Elite Zombie had absorbed the earth chi from the place of extreme earth, along with some special materials that Han Shuo had mixed with his body. The armor covered his entire body, and the toughness of his body had greatly increased compared to before. He could use the element of earth to form all kinds of attacks, and he could also use the earth escape technique to conceal his tracks, or suddenly attack others. The Earth Elite Zombie was about 1.8 meters tall and had an ordinary face. At this moment, it opened its ghastly mouth, revealing a somewhat simple and honest smile as it stared at Han Shuo in a daze. Like Little Skull, although the Earth Elite Zombie had a soul, it couldn't directly communicate with Han Shuo. It could only communicate through the mysterious connection between the two. The Earth Elite Zombie looked at Han Shuo with a grin and gestured with its large hands. A hill on the ground slowly flattened, and the entire area was restored to its original state. Alright, I know your abilities, so you don't need to show off. It was like a naughty child, eager to show off its abilities. Han Shuo understood that the Earth Elite Zombie had just formed, and its intelligence was still very low. It needed to be constantly instilled with knowledge in order for it to understand more things. The Earth Elite Zombie's lips moved as soon as Han Shuo's words fell. He flipped over and leapt into the center of his hiding place. The ground then trembled lightly as his figure reappeared. However, when the Earth Elite Zombie reappeared, its two hands were holding three throbbing blurry shadows. Ah, the three Yin demons have formed as well. Han Shuo was astonished, and in his joy, he immediately activated his magical yuan and shot a black light towards the three blurry shadows. He opened his mouth and yelled, "By my command, Yin demons, return to your positions." As soon as the black light hit the three blurry shadows, a swirling mass of jet black mist continuously appeared from the three blurry shadows. Then, the originally blurry shadows gradually became clear. Long tails, sharp fangs, and the size of a fierce wild monkey. However, they all had two sharp curved horns, a pair of bat-like wings, and a pair of dark green evil eyes that shone with a frightening light. These were the forms of the three Yin demons. After the three Yin demons gradually became clear, they flew out from the Earth Elite Zombie's two hands and shuttled through the air like lightning. Their forms changed from solid to incorporeal, and from incorporeal to solid again. They were faintly discernible in the air as they changed their forms at will. Their mouths emitted soul-stealing, joyful howls. The three demons circled around Han Shuo once, and with a thought from Han Shuo, they entered the back of his neck into Han Shuo's body, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Then, Han Shuo smiled faintly, and with a sway of his body, four identical Han Shuos appeared out of thin air. Apart from Han Shuo's original body, the other three Han Shuos were transformed from demons. It was truly mysterious and unfathomable. For a moment, the Earth Elite Zombie didn't know what was going on. It was obvious that he was confused. He stood there motionless, blinking his eyes as he foolishly looked at Han Shuo. After a while, the Earth Elite Zombie grinned foolishly, and with a movement of his thick body, he instantly arrived at the position of Han Shuo's real body on the far left. He even extended his left hand and pointed at Han Shuo, meaning, "I found you." There was a mysterious connection between the two, so Han Shuo didn't find it strange that the Earth Elite Zombie was able to recognize the real one. Seeing the Earth Elite Zombie pointing at him foolishly, Han Shuo's thoughts moved again, and the three demons turned into fake bodies, turning into 3 rays of black light and returning to his body. He continuously used the three demons to transform into fake bodies in an extremely short amount of time, appearing out of thin air and then quickly disappearing. After doing this a few dozen times, Han Shuo was finally able to quickly and skillfully grasp this secret art. At first, it took the Earth Elite Zombie a while to recognize Han Shuo, but when Han Shuo repeatedly did this, the Earth Elite Zombie was able to rely on the connection between the two to quickly point out the real one as soon as Han Shuo's fake body appeared. He thought that Han Shuo was playing an interesting game with him, and tirelessly carried out the operation to find Han Shuo. He didn't feel bored or tired at all, and kept grinning foolishly. He didn't have the coldness and fierceness that a zombie should have, which made Han Shuo a bit worried that he wouldn't be able to grow quickly. Han Shuo wasn't the zombie driver from Chu Kanglin's memories, so he naturally couldn't bring a zombie warrior with him to various places and occasions. Therefore, after some consideration, Han Shuo decided to send the Earth Elite Zombie to the space and time he came from. Han Shuo wasn't worried about the Earth Elite Zombie's strength. Having experienced the secret method of demonic refinement, the Earth Elite Zombie could skillfully use the Yuan energy of Earth, and would certainly become a very competent helper. However, since the Earth Elite Zombie had just broken out of the ground, it seemed that because he hadn't experienced the tempering of a great battle, he was a bit naive and honest and needed to grow quickly. In the plane that the Little Skull had always stayed in, there seemed to be powerful existences everywhere. Even Han Shuo didn't know how tyrannical the Little Skull's strength was, but even in that plane, he would encounter enemies that he needed to avoid. It seemed that letting the Earth Elite Zombie return home in glory would be a good idea. "Let me introduce you to a friend. He has my aura on him, you'll definitely like him." Han Shuo thought for a moment, and said to the Earth Elite Zombie with a smile. Then, using the connection between him and the Little Skull, Han Shuo chanted a magic incantation. When the Little Skull appeared in place, the zombie and the skeleton stared at each other silently. The purple demon eye of the Little Skull was shining brightly, and it seemed to be very interested in the existence of the Earth Elite Zombie. It took the initiative to walk to the Earth Elite Zombie's side, and stretched out its bony claw to pat the Earth Elite Zombie's shoulder. It used its other bony claw to beat the bones in front of the Earth Elite Zombie's chest, and gestured to Han Shuo. The meaning seemed to be, "I'll protect him, don't worry." Chapter 220. Both of them had Han Shuo's blood essence. They instinctively felt close to each other, and Han Shuo could feel that feelings were slowly growing between them. The Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie, who were looking at each other, seemed to be slowly communicating about something. After a while, they both looked at Han Shuo with eager eyes. "All right, I'll send you back." The two sent the message that they were leaving together. Han Shuo responded with a smile, and with an incantation, the Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie disappeared from the Cemetery of Death. After the two left, the Cemetery of Death regained its peace. The ground of the place of extreme Earth was still flat, and the Demon Cave had stopped operating because of the Demon's emergence. Looking around and seeing that there was nothing to worry about, Han Shuo made a trip to the valley where the dwarves lived. Han, why did you think of coming here? As soon as he arrived at the dwarves' valley, these simple dwarves expressed their deep enthusiasm. Along the way, there were people constantly asking him friendly questions. After Han Shuo's last visit, the dwarves had received a large amount of food and daily necessities. Now, their elderly and children were all wearing thick cotton-padded clothes to ward off the cold, and there were warm stoves to bake them. With enough food to quench their hunger, even the depths of winter no longer seemed frightening. Along the way, Han Shuo could see from the dwarves' faces that they were brimming with satisfaction and contentment. When these dwarves saw Han Shuo appear, they all expressed gratitude and welcomed him, yelling to each other to spread the news of Han Shuo's arrival. "Uncle Han, this is for you." On the way to the center of the valley, a 6 or 7-year-old dwarf child holding a skewer of tanghulu walked up to Han Shuo, holding up a glossy roasted meat, and said in his tender voice, "Thank you, good child." Bending down, Han Shuo touched the dwarf child, who was only a few dozen centimeters tall, and said with a smile, casually taking the roasted meat from him. Some of the adult dwarves around him showed kind smiles, and the atmosphere seemed very harmonious. It seemed that they had a very good impression of Han Shuo. When Han Shuo arrived at the center of the village and saw the familiar dwarf warrior Bennett, as well as the old dwarf village chief Calvin, Han Shuo smiled and asked, "Elder, how have you been lately?" "Dear Han, with you, this winter is no longer cold. Everyone will have warm clothes and enough food. No one will starve to death in winter." Chief Calvin had a gratified expression on his face as he faced Han Shuo and expressed his gratitude to Han Shuo with dwarven etiquette. Although Han Shuo hadn't helped these simple dwarves completely out of good intentions in the beginning, he realized that these stubborn dwarves were actually very easy to get along with after coming into contact with them. They were unbelievably generous to those they acknowledged as friends. Unknowingly, Han Shuo had gained their friendship, but some of their actions and methods had also gained Han Shuo's favor. This made Han Shuo, who had originally intended to make use of them, truly treat them as trustworthy friends. That's good, that's good. If there's anything else you need, you can take advantage of this trip to let me know. I'm about to return to the human world again and can help you bring something along. Han Shuo maintained a kind smile on his face as he spoke unhurriedly to Calvin. Waving his hands, Calvin said emotionally, "No need, we'll be able to get through this winter easily. When spring comes, we'll need to use our own efforts in exchange for more returns. You know, we're a hard-working race. Children need to be raised from a young age and can't be allowed to develop lazy habits." Nodding, Han Shuo said understandingly, "So that's how it is." Right, I've come this time because I want you to help me forge some weapons and armor. Would that be convenient for you, Elder? Han, you're treating us like strangers. We're friends, how could we not? The wild beasts don't come out during the winter, and there are very few places to move about in the dark forest. Forging weapons is our hobby, and it's a very interesting activity to forge some weapons when we're free. There's no problem at all. Calvin didn't hesitate at all and immediately agreed readily. He even looked quite happy. Really, Han, we've been thinking about how to repay you during this time. Now that you want us to forge weapons, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Bennett laughed heartily as he described their sincerity to Han Shuo. It looked like these dwarves were still grateful for the daily necessities he'd given them. These dwarves weren't willing to take advantage of friends that they truly acknowledged. Therefore, they'd been searching for ways to repay Han Shuo. Han Shuo was a bit embarrassed after Bennett's words. Han Shuo had harbored malicious intentions from the very beginning when he'd approached these dwarves. However, the dwarves' kindness and simplicity made him feel ashamed of his inferiority sometimes. Let's not do anything for now because I haven't decided what type of weapon I want to forge. When I've decided what weapon I need, I'll bring some raw materials with me next time. Han Shuo said. After leaving the Dwarves' Valley, Han Shuo didn't linger in the dark forest and returned to the glorious Tanai through the Cemetery of Death. Putting away the magic staff, Han Shua walked out of the room and discovered that the entire shop was empty. He was a bit stunned and didn't know where they'd all gone. Han Shua had given all the authority over the Soul Destroyer mercenary band to Trunks, while Phoebe was in charge of handling the treasures. Emily was in charge of keeping an eye on the messy affairs of the Dark Mantle organization, while Gilbert played a protective role in protecting Phoebe and Emily. The sky was like a burning cloud and the sunset was bright red, indicating that it was already evening. During the day, the soldiers of the Cairo mercenary band were everywhere in the glorious Tanai. The guards of the Valley of Sunshine's merchants were also patrolling the streets. Therefore, Han Shua wasn't too worried about their safety. Seeing that he was the only one left in the shop, Han Shua took out the thick tome of necromancy he'd obtained from the Cemetery of Death and began to slowly study it. During the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band's trip last night, the long-lost canopy of necromancy had been unleashed and had played an enormous role. If it wasn't for Light Grand Magus Ferguson's timely arrival, the dark creatures within the range of the canopy of necromancy would have continued to wreak havoc and display extraordinary battle strength. Even after absorbing the Calamity Church's Archmage Clarendon's memories, Han Shua didn't have any memories of the canopy of necromancy. He didn't even have the corpse resurrection spell that he'd previously grasped. In other words, this magic tome from the Cemetery of Death was the crystallization of necromancy magic. It contained a large amount of necromancy knowledge, including some necromancy spells that had been lost in the past. These things were extremely useful to Han Shua. After obtaining Clarendon's memories, Han Shua's understanding of necromancy magic had already reached the level of an archmage. He could understand many of the difficult and specialized sentences in the tome and didn't need to ask Fanny for more knowledge. Time always passed so quickly when one was studying magic. The sky had completely darkened in the blink of an eye. Light footsteps outside roused Han Shua from his reverie. With a thought, Han Shua clearly saw the newcomers through the surveillance of the three Yin demons. It turned out that Trunks and Gilbert had returned together. "Brian, I have good news for you. I think you'll be very happy to hear it." Trunks had a joyful expression as he spoke to Han Shua. Starting, Han Shua was surprised and asked, "What good news? Do you remember Odysseus and the other 5 who adventured with you in the dark forest? What is it?" "When I came back today, I saw the 6 of them enter the Valley of Sunshine. Odysseus and the others have extraordinary strength and deep feelings for you. Our mercenary band has just been established and we need strong and reliable people like them. If you invite them, I think they might be willing to join us." Han Shua couldn't help but say happily when he heard Trunks' words, "This is good news indeed. Odysseus and Gordon are both senior swordsmen, and there's also the water adept mage Aphrodite, a journeyman thunder mage, and the female elf archer Nia. Their strength isn't weak at all. If they can join us, I think it will be a great addition to our mercenary band. It looks like our luck is quite good, heh. They seem to be protecting a merchant this time. I spoke to them and they said they'll come tomorrow to catch up with you. I think there shouldn't be any problems." Trunks smiled. Han Shua, who'd been listening to Trunks speak, suddenly furrowed his brow and looked at a large tree not far away. He said lowly, "Mr. Edwin, since you're here, let's talk in the yard." Chapter 221. The Yin demons had been placed in the surroundings to spy on the surroundings. Not even the slightest movement around the shop could escape Han Shua's notice. Even if the other was a dark Grand Magus, it would be impossible for them to enter Han Shua's territory without making a sound. Han Shua had already discovered Edwin and Belinda's tracks through the Yin demons when they landed on a large tree in the distance. He called out without hesitation. Even if Han Shua was the only one in the shop, Han Shua wouldn't be afraid of Edwin using the magical formation in the courtyard, not to mention that Gilbert and Trunks were also here. Edwin and Belinda were obviously stunned by Han Shua's terrifying detection abilities. Astonishment was written all over Edwin's face as he revealed himself from the dense foliage. He looked at Han Shua in the distance and raised his voice, "How did you discover me?" "Nothing is impossible." Han Shua shouted coldly and then shot a look at Gilbert and Trunks. A calm smile appeared on his face as he elegantly pointed at the empty chairs in the courtyard. He raised his head to look at them. Since you two are in the mood, why don't you come over and talk in detail? I don't sense any killing intent from you. It looks like you're not here to kill me this time. Han Shuo, whose magical arts had reached the bloodlust realm, actually had an extremely acute sense for killing intent that naturally exuded from experts, perhaps due to his growing desire to kill. Edwin and Belinda made no effort to conceal their expressions when they landed on the tree and looked at the courtyard. Their expressions were calm in that moment, with a few traces of curiosity and caution, but they didn't reveal any killing intent. Edwin was even more surprised when he heard Han Shuo's words. His gaze when he looked at Han Shuo was full of surprise as he sized up Han Shuo, seeming to want to see something. After a while, Edwin revealed a bitter smile and shook his head. I came with sincerity this time, but I can't tell if you have any intention of killing me. Because your courtyard is too dangerous, I won't be coming down for now. I don't want to be killed by a group of young but formidable children like you. As he spoke, Edwin landed lightly on the roof of the shop with Belinda. The two didn't dare approach the courtyard lightly, as if they were very wary of the mysteries within. They were prepared to deal with a sudden attack at any time and appeared to be very cautious. To be honest, Han Shuo did hope that the two would land in the courtyard and then use the magical formation to combine the strength of Gilbert and Trunks to kill them with a thunderous blow. This way, he wouldn't have to constantly be on guard against Edwin's sudden attack. It was a pity that sly old fox Edwin wouldn't fall for it so easily. Edwin had come to spy on the situation last night and deeply understood the dangers of this courtyard. That was why he hadn't dared to take the risk and land in. Now that his plan had failed, Han Shuo's expression immediately darkened. He looked darkly at Edwin and Belinda on the roof and said impatiently, "If you're not here to kill me, then are you planning on working together to deal with Ferguson? He's an important figure in the Church of Light and has an irreconcilable enmity with you. You're the ones he should be focusing on." "You're wrong. Perhaps you don't even know it yourself, but you've become the Church of Light's mortal enemy. They'll make you disappear from this world at all costs." Edwin looked deeply at Han Shuo and spoke lowly. "Oh? I don't think so. Ferguson doesn't represent the entire Church of Light. I think that my enmity with Florida isn't so serious that the entire Church of Light would act against me. Aren't you being a bit too alarmist?" Han Shuo was speechless and spoke mockingly. Looking at Han Shuo with a pitying expression, Edwin explained slowly, "Your miraculous performance last night made the Church of Light realize just how terrifying you are. The fact that your little skull doesn't shine with the radiance of light in particular has sowed the seeds of disaster for you. Even if it wasn't for his grandson, Florida, Ferguson would definitely act against you because your existence is a serious threat to the Church of Light." Han Shuo immediately sank into silence when he heard these words. Han Shuo wasn't a stupid person, it was just that he'd never seriously considered this problem. When Edwin reminded him, Han Shuo recalled that the Church of Light seemed to have played the most important role in the destruction of necromancy. Light magic had a fatal destructive power against the dark creatures of the Necromancy Major. When the Necromancy Major was at its peak, hordes of dark creatures would wreak havoc on the continent. The Church of Light would always send out large numbers of disciples to use the most direct and simple light magic to bathe large numbers of dark creatures in light magic and deal a devastating blow. As Han Shuo thought carefully, he quickly realized that Edwin's words weren't false. The little skull and zombies that he'd refined using the secret arts of the magic would be impervious to the destructive attacks of light magic. This was an absolutely intolerable fact for the Church of Light. It looked like he'd unknowingly gotten himself into great trouble. Seeing that Han Shuo was silent, his straight eyebrows deeply furrowed, and his expression growing darker and darker, Edwin obviously understood that Han Shuo had already realized the severity of the matter. Smiling faintly, Edwin pointed a finger at Han Shuo and said in an extremely bewitching voice, "I'm sure you understand how much influence the Church of Light has on the profound continent. Apart from our Calamity Church, who has always resisted them, there are very few powers that can resist them. Don't hesitate, as long as you join our Calamity Church, we can forget all our past grievances. With you, Our Calamity Church's necromancer's research on dark creatures will reach a level that no one before us has ever achieved. Then, with large numbers of dark creatures as an army, we can destroy any Church of Light stronghold in the world and make all living creatures prostrate themselves under our teachings. And you will become the most respected person in the Calamity Church. You will be able to obtain anything you want. Wealth, women, power, it's all at your fingertips. What a wonderful thing. I'm sure that with your wisdom, you can imagine the grand future. Honored Master, this old thing's words are quite reasonable. Just agree to him. Dark Dragon Gilbert was so excited when he heard about wealth and women that he didn't know which way was north. Shut up. Han Shua glared angrily at Gilbert before looking at Edwin. I'm very sorry, although your suggestion is very tempting, I think I can't agree to it. It's your church's reputation that's poor. I don't want to become the target of everyone's criticism. The Calamity Church was a power that everyone hated on the entire continent. This church hid in the shadows and possessed power that no country dared ignore. They had a fanatical belief in destruction and an incomprehensible stubborn desire. They were incompatible with the creeds of any country or religion on the continent. If he joined such a church, Han Shua would become the enemy of all countries. This was something that Han Shua absolutely didn't want to see. Not to mention that every dark creature refined using demonic arts was extremely difficult to refine. It required an enormous amount of manpower and resources. Han Shua didn't have the slightest bit of confidence that he would be able to refine even more wondrous creatures in large quantities. Even if he succeeded, according to the teachings of the Calamity Church, the profound continent would be shrouded in a sea of blood and fire, finally turning into a wasteland. This was obviously not something that he wanted to see. Han Shua's resolute refusal without the slightest hesitation obviously puzzled Edwin. He was about to continue trying to persuade him when a beam of black light suddenly shot through the air, shooting straight for Edwin on the roof. You should all die. I will avenge Big Sister Elaine today. Emily flew over with a furious expression on her face. Her long hair danced in the wind as she held her magic staff, baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. She looked like an enraged tigress. Looking disdainfully at Emily in the distance, Edwin waved his hand and blocked all the attacks with a barrier of darkness. He then looked at Han Shua and smiled faintly. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. I think that you might change your mind when the Church of Light takes action. Edwin didn't linger after speaking and left with Belinda, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. If the Grand Magus Edwin wanted to use the levitation spell to leave, no one here would be able to stop him. Therefore, Emily and Phoebe didn't foolishly chase after him and returned to the courtyard. What's going on? Emily looked at Han Shua and asked. Smiling wryly and sighing lightly, Han Shua said, I've run into big trouble. What's going on? What's so big that it's giving you a headache? Emily had been with Han Shua for so long, but she'd never seen Han Shua have such a headache. She couldn't help but ask. When Han Shua explained the course of events to Han Shua and Phoebe, the two girls were startled and realized the severity of the situation. Their eyebrows were tightly knit, and they didn't know how to respond. The Church of Light was different from the Calamity Church. They were the most influential religious organization on the profound continent and had a wide network among the populace. Large numbers of people worshipped the Church of Light in any country, and their influence was greater than that of a small country. If all the followers of the Church of Light were like Ferguson, then I think the Church of Light wouldn't amount to much. Han Shua said disdainfully after thinking for a while. No, the majority of the people in the Church of Light are kind and upright. At least, some of the people I know are worthy of respect in terms of character. Ferguson wasn't a bad person to begin with, but he spoiled his grandson too much and often cleaned up after Florida's wanton and willful actions. That's why he gradually became so utilitarian. In the entire continent, apart from the Calamity Church, there are many necromancers. I think as long as you don't join the Calamity Church, the Church of the God of Light won't necessarily put you to death. Not all the followers of the Church of Light are so unreasonable. Emily thought for a while and couldn't help but speak words of comfort to Han Shua. It's hard to say. This matter is indeed somewhat thorny. However, if the Church of Light wants to make a move against me indiscriminately, I won't be lenient. No matter what excuse anyone uses, as long as they want to kill me, I won't hesitate to find a way to kill them. Han Shuo thought for a while and said in a low voice. Master, no matter what you do, your loyal servant Gilbert will swear loyalty to you, Dark Dragon Gilbert said in a timely manner. Trunks, all the Soul Destroyer mercenary band's operations in the future will be carried out under your name. Also, don't tell anyone about the relationship between this mercenary and me. Otherwise, I think it may bring unnecessary trouble to the mercenary band because of my identity. Han Shuo suddenly said to Trunks after pondering for a while. Brian, do you think I'm someone who's afraid of trouble? Trunks was somewhat displeased as he said coldly. Shaking his head, Han Shuo said, don't think too much, the mercenary band is mine. However, don't make this matter public for the time being. It won't be too late to make it public after I've settled the Church of Light's troubles. You should know that our mercenary band has just started and I also want it to develop even faster. Therefore, we can't let this matter affect it for the time being. After hearing Han Shuo's explanation, Trunks' expression returned to normal. He smiled faintly and nodded, saying, You're the leader, I'll do whatever you say. This is the mercenary band's rule. What have you two been doing today? Why haven't you been in the shop the entire day? Seeing that Trunks had agreed, Han Shuo turned his head to look at Emily and Phoebe, asking in astonishment. I've negotiated a big business deal. I've already dealt with all the things you gave me. We've received a total of 70,000 gold coins. Apart from the amount used to establish the mercenary band, I'll be keeping the rest for you for the time being. Phoebe explained. Sister Cecilia, one of the 3 heavyweights of the Dark Mantle, has always been in charge of the Dark Mantle's various affairs outside of the Empire. She suddenly came to the Valley of Sunshine today and I immediately went to see her after receiving the news. Because we talked about old times, I was delayed for the entire day. Emily looked at Han Shuo and explained. She paused and smiled faintly, saying, She's very curious about you because I've discussed some matters of cooperation with you. Don't worry, Master is willing to provide you with gold coins to visit prostitutes. Han Shuo laughed oddly and paid no more attention to Gilbert as he walked towards Emily's room. Although Han Shuo and Phoebe were boyfriend and girlfriend on the surface, the two hadn't developed to the point of entangling their bodies. Han Shuo could only look for Emily to resolve some of his physical needs. Wasn't it Miss Phoebe who told him to go? Why is he looking for Madame Emily instead? Did he go to the wrong place? Gilbert looked at Trunks and grumbled in confusion. Rubbing his chin, Trunks watched as Han Shuo disappeared into Emily's room, a thoughtful expression on his face as he smiled, Don't mind your master's business. Talking less and doing more is the rule you should follow. When Han Shuo entered Emily's room, he placed one of the 3 Yin demons monitoring the entire store outside her room. He then walked into the room with a cheeky smile, all right, don't be angry. Go find your little Phoebe. Emily said huffily as she glared at Han Shuo. If you want to find someone, you should find my little Emily first. Just let Phoebe wait. Han Shuo smiled as he walked towards Emily, ignoring Emily's resistance as he pulled her into his embrace. His hands moved up and down as he wantonly violated her voluptuous body, causing Emily to pant heavily. In just a short while, she was completely aroused and took the initiative to cooperate with Han Shuo. The two quickly took off their clothes and intertwined with familiarity. By the time Emily's body had softened into a ball of cotton and she'd been thoroughly exhausted by Han Shuo's ferocious thrusts, the lingering resentment in her heart had long since disappeared without a trace after a few moments of pleasure. At this time, her entire naked body was flushed as she lazily curled up in Han Shuo's embrace. Her slender fingers lightly tapped on Han Shuo's chest as she whispered, I know I shouldn't be angry, but sometimes I just can't control myself. His large hands caressed Emily's smooth back as Han Shuo said softly, "This shows that you care about me. You don't have to explain anything. It would be strange if you weren't angry at all." Han Shuo and Phoebe said words of love after that, leaning against each other as they slowly became affectionate. They both ignored the passage of time and forgot about Phoebe's words from before. However, Phoebe, who was in the other room, waited for a long time after taking a bath and changing her clothes. However, she found that Han Shuo still hadn't come over. Gradually, she became somewhat impatient. After putting on her clothes neatly, Phoebe pushed open the door and left. She crossed the courtyard and walked straight to Han Shuo's room. When she arrived at the door, she knocked and said, "Brian, can I come in?" When Phoebe pushed open the door to her room, Han Shuo had already discovered her movements through the demons. Seeing Phoebe walk straight to his room, Han Shuo immediately put on his clothes in a hurry. Gilbert, in particular, chuckled mischievously and said, "Honored master, did you have a wonderful night last night?" "Aha, I think it must have been a memorable night." "Shut up." Han Shuo flew into a rage out of humiliation and glared fiercely at Gilbert. "Brian, if the weapons on this list can be forged by the dwarves, it will definitely greatly increase the combat power and passion of our subordinates." A list full of weapons was handed to Han Shuo by Trunks. I still have something to do, so I'll leave first." Emily was a little better, but last night's experience also made her a little shy, so she left first. "I also have something to do." When Phoebe saw Emily walk away, she also expressed her position and hurriedly planned to leave. "Phoebe, wait!" Han Shuo suddenly said to Phoebe, who was about to leave immediately. For no reason, Phoebe's face instantly turned red. She didn't dare to look at Han Shuo. She just quickly glanced at Han Shuo and said shyly, "What?" Miss Phoebe, who's always so unkind to people, actually has such a shy side. It looks like last night's events have changed Miss Phoebe's personality. Gilbert still believed that something must have happened between Han Shuo and Phoebe last night, and that it was just lewd nonsense. "Lewd dragon, don't think that everyone is as shameless and perverted as you. If you dare talk nonsense again, I'll stab you with my sword." Phoebe also flew into a rage out of humiliation and glared fiercely at Gilbert, threatening him with a cold face. "These are all things I need, help me purchase them while you're at it." Taking out a list, Han Shuo handed it to Phoebe, asking Phoebe to help him purchase some supplies. Taking the list from Han Shuo, Phoebe gave a low and didn't say anything else, quickly leaving the shop. Not long after Phoebe left, Han Shuo was discussing with Gilbert and Trunks how to deal with Tanai. Through the demons, Han Shuo discovered that Odysseus and the others were cautiously looking around, standing in front of the door, not daring to enter. It looked like everyone who'd come to the Valley of Sunshine had heard of this shop's bad reputation. Odysseus and the others were no exception. It was obvious that they'd been too cautious due to the evil reputation of the cursed lands. "They're here." Han Shuo smiled faintly and stood up to open the door. "What's the specific situation? Can you tell me in detail?" Odysseus was obviously a bit interested, but he knew that this kind of thing couldn't be careless and asked carefully. Han Shuo briefly explained the origins and circumstances of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band, including Trunks' hatred and the recent conflict between Han Shuo and Florida. He didn't purposely conceal any of this. When Han Shuo finished speaking, the other five's expressions changed. They obviously hadn't expected that Han Shuo and Trunks had already done so many sensational things in Tanai under the glorious sun in such a short period of time. They all seemed eager to give it a try and revealed expressions of interest. "I think I'll need to discuss this matter with them and then give you an answer." As the leader of the six, Odysseus naturally needed to ask the other five's opinions one by one. Therefore, he couldn't give an answer so quickly. Nodding in understanding, Han Shuo smiled faintly and said, "I understand. You can think about it for a few days." In the following time, Han Shuo chatted happily with them about some interesting things in the dark forest. The six finally took their leave when it was almost noon. During this process, as a participant, Trunks would occasionally chime in with a word or two. However, Dark Dragon Jill seemed a bit bored and sat there, bored to death. He only sized up Aphrodite and Nia with a pair of lustful eyes, and only withdrew his lustful gaze after being glared at by Han Shuo a few times. "Let's go, we're going out for a bit," Han Shuo said to Trunks and Gilbert after Odysseus and the other five left. "Where are we going?" Trunks was a bit puzzled and asked. "The current situation in the Valley of Sunshine is complicated. Our original target was Florida, but now that Ferguson has joined the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band, I think it'll be hard for us to make a move in the near future. I think we need to talk to Loridan about Ferguson's arrival last night. We can also obtain more information through Loridan to decide what we should do next," Han Shuo said calmly. The group was quite familiar with the road to the Cairo Mercenary Band this time and didn't run into any obstacles along the way. However, before Han Shuo and the other two had even passed through the enormous square, they heard an earth-shattering explosion from the depths of the Cairo Mercenary Band. When Han Shuo and the other two arrived, they discovered that one of the buildings had collapsed. Black smoke was rising from within, and several badly mangled corpses were scattered around the collapsed building. Bald Loridan was like an enraged wild beast, his entire body brimming with an extremely dangerous aura. He was standing around the building and growling lowly at the people around him, showing signs of going berserk at any moment. Harris was standing not far away from Loridan, his expression also dark, and he looked to be in an extremely bad mood. When he saw Han Shuo and the other two walk over, he wasn't as polite as he usually was. He looked at the corpses on the ground with some annoyance and seemed to be blaming himself. It looks like we've come at the wrong time." Han Shuo curled his lips when they arrived. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Loridan took a few deep breaths and turned to Harris. "Bury these brothers properly. I will definitely find out who did this and tear them to pieces." Harris didn't say much and nodded painfully. He then directed the mercenaries that had gathered from all directions to carefully lift the dismembered corpses and start cleaning up the scene. "Come with me." Loridan's face was gloomy as he snorted softly and walked towards the largest building he lived in. It was very obvious that Han Shuo and the other two had coincidentally come across an attack on the Cairo Mercenary Band. However, Han Shuo and the other two didn't find any traces of the enemy when they looked around. They didn't know what had happened. When they entered Loridan's large house, he waved his hand for Han Shuo and the other two to find a stone bench to sit on. He said with a dark face, "The enemy wanted to kill me. The room that exploded is where I handle the daily affairs of the Cairo Mercenary Band. Under normal circumstances, I would have gone there at noon. However, I was delayed by something today. When I was 10 meters away from the door of the room, a strong mana fluctuation came from inside the room, and a violent explosion immediately occurred. It seems that there was a magic device set up beforehand. Otherwise, it wouldn't have exploded in such a timely manner. I almost died inside. There must be people from other powers in your Cairo Mercenary Band, otherwise this kind of thing wouldn't have happened. Also, when I was fighting Florida in front of the Valley of Sunshine last time, Andy of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band arrived in time to save him just as I was about to kill him. At that time, there were only people from your Cairo Mercenary Band at the fence. Logically speaking, the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band wouldn't have been able to arrive in time to save Florida from my hands. I had my suspicions at that time, but it looks like my suspicions weren't unfounded." Han Shuo thought for a moment and said, "That's for sure. I can arrange my people in other powers, so other powers can naturally do the same. It's just that it was too dangerous this time and I almost died. I don't know which power did it." Loridan's face was dark as he growled angrily. Seeing that Loridan knew what he was doing, Han Shuo didn't say anything else. He inwardly thought that Loridan looked like he had all brawn and brains, but his thoughts were actually so meticulous. No wonder he could replace the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band and sit in the position of first in the Valley of Sunshine. Florida's grandfather, the Light Grand Magus Ferguson of the Church of Light, has arrived. I don't know where Florida has been moved to, and I can't find a suitable opportunity to make a move. I've come to find you this time because I want to know where Florida has been arranged to be. Since you've also arranged for your people in the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band, I think you might know about this. If I don't know where Florida is, I have no way of making a move, so I need you to tell me. Han Shua thought for a moment and said to Loridan, I already know about what happened last night, but since that old fox Ferguson has arrived, I think it's too unrealistic for you to assassinate Florida. After your attack last night, Florida will surely be protected even more carefully. Even if you know where Florida is, you may not have the opportunity to make a move. Loridan's expression had completely returned to normal by now as he looked at Han Shua and said directly. Han Shua understood that Loridan wasn't lying. However, now that the three Ying demons had taken form and there was also the Earth Elite zombie that could burrow underground, Han Shua had every reason to believe that as long as he could find the hiding place of a heavily injured person, Han Shua believed that he would have a chance to succeed no matter how heavily protected the person was. I understand everything you've said, but if you know where Florida is, I still hope that you can tell me. Han Shua smiled confidently. Loridan obviously felt that Han Shua had overestimated his own abilities this time. Although he understood that Han Shua's strength was extraordinary, he felt that even if Han Shua used the Cairo Mercenary Band's strength, he still wouldn't have the chance to assassinate Florida in the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band's headquarters. Alright, I'll keep an eye out. If I have news of Florida, I'll send someone to inform you. Loridan's expression was a bit impatient as he said with a cold face. At this point, Han Shua knew that there was nothing more to say. He nodded and left with Gilbert. What the hell, we're helping him and his attitude is still so bad. Gilbert started cursing as soon as he left the Cairo Mercenary Band's territory. If you were almost blown to death, I think your attitude would be even worse than his. It looks like Loridan was truly frightened today. Trunks looked at Gilbert and smiled. Loridan is in a bad mood. I don't know if he'll be unable to control himself and make a move in a short period of time. Han Shua chuckled and paused. Han Shua then said sinisterly, it looks like the Valley of Sunshine is starting to fall into chaos. I think we should change our plans now. I've thought carefully and have a better idea. Chapter 224. What should we do? Trunks asked. The waters of the Valley of Sunshine are too muddy, and our power is too weak. We can't contend with either side. No matter what the final result is, we won't be in control of the Valley of Sunshine. At the end of the day, it's all because the mercenary band is too weak. It doesn't seem wise for us to get involved at this time. We can temporarily set aside our grudge with Florida and take the opportunity to recruit and expand our power while they fight until their heads bleed. The most important thing right now is to strengthen our own strength and not join forces with them. The shop I need is an inauspicious place. No matter who holds power in the Valley of Sunshine, they won't know how to use it and will leave it empty. I'll find a way to get it back sooner or later. There's no need to trap us in a place like this because of this shop. Not to mention that Loridan isn't a good person. Our safety won't be guaranteed if we stay in the Valley of Sunshine at this time. If Loridan isn't in a good mood, he might turn against us. It won't be so easy for us to leave the Valley of Sunshine then. Han Shua responded calmly after careful consideration. You mean that we should leave the Valley of Sunshine for now? Han Shua's words were complicated, but to put it simply, it was to sit on top of the mountain and reap the spoils later. Trunks roughly grasped Han Shua's meaning after hearing Han Shua's explanation. We can leave the Valley of Sunshine, but we don't need to leave the Valley of Sunshine's sphere of influence. We can learn from the other three powers and first develop our power on the outskirts of the Valley of Sunshine. With the gold coins and your connections, you can take the opportunity to recruit more mercenaries and slowly strengthen your mercenary band while the other four powers fight amongst themselves. In addition, I need to leave for a while. If I'm discovered by the Church of Light, it may bring some unnecessary trouble to me and the mercenary band. I'll take advantage of this opportunity to help you go to the dark forest and have the dwarves forge a batch of the weapons we need. We'll then see if we can get another batch of good stuff through the forest troll. When Han Shuo thought about it seriously, his mind was very active. He calmly calculated the follow-up course of action and slowly explained to Trunks. When Han Shuo finished, Trunks nodded with a smile. There are still a few months until the battle for the succession in the Valley of Sunshine. Our mercenary band has a large amount of gold coins as a foundation, so I can take the opportunity to recruit more experts. Perhaps this will be of some use when the time comes. Let's go back and discuss with Emily and Phoebe. We need to leave the Valley of Sunshine as soon as possible. Han Shuo looked at the sky, planning to leave the Valley of Sunshine as soon as possible in order to make preparations for the upcoming matters. On the way back to the shop, there were many people on the busy street. All kinds of strange items were placed outside by the merchants of various countries, attracting the attention of the passing merchants. There were muscular orcs with dense fur covering their skin, beautiful elves with sharp ears, and other strange races. They all lingered on the street, looking at the special items around them, trying to find a business opportunity that would bring them great profits. As he weaved through the crowd, Han Shuo suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of danger. It was as if there was an enemy watching him from the shadows, a faint killing intent locking onto him, ready to give him a fatal blow at any time. Being in the bloodlust realm, Han Shuo had a terrifying ability to sense others' killing intent towards him. Even in the bustling merchant street, he could still clearly sense the hidden killing intent. This was truly incredible. With a thought, the three Yin demons flew out without a trace, like drifting air. They slowly spread out and circled around Han Shuo's blind spots, observing any places where danger might appear. With the help of the Yin demons, not a single corner could escape Han Shuo's prying eyes. At this moment, Han Shuo imprinted everything within a dozen meters into his mind. Han Shuo quickly identified each and every person, trying to find the source of the danger. On the wall of a shop on the left, in a blind spot that was difficult for the naked eye to see, a beautiful face with impeccable features leapt into Han Shuo's line of sight. Female elven archer Maxine's eyes were like the edge of a sword, glinting with a cold light. She held an oddly shaped bow in her left hand, seeming to be waiting for the most opportune moment to give him a fatal blow. Thunder Archmage Asa stood shoulder to shoulder with her, his expression cold and dark. He held a magic staff in his right hand and was also ready, as if he could strike at any moment. However, there were many merchants from all over the world around the three of them on this street that had a large flow of people. If one wanted to carry out an assassination in such a place, one's grasp of timing had to be impeccable. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to succeed. A cold smile suddenly appeared on his face as Han Shuo continued walking without a change in expression. The three Yin demons kept an eye on Maxine and Asa's movements, secretly thinking of a plan to deal with them. At the corner of a street, Han Shuo's body, which had been moving forward, suddenly flashed inside. Trunks and Gilbert also disappeared without a trace at the same time. Maxine and Asa looked at Han Shuo's group walk straight ahead, only to disappear around a corner. They looked at each other and were slightly startled. Their originally hidden bodies couldn't help but join the flow of people, attempting to find out what had happened at that strange corner. Where are they? Asa looked around the corner when he arrived, but didn't find any traces of Han Shuo's group. He couldn't help but exclaim softly with a frown. At this moment, a low whistle suddenly sounded as a dark, cold light suddenly appeared in the noisy street. It moved in a miraculous curve, avoiding the endless stream of people. It was like a slithering snake, quickly baring its savage fangs in the darkness and biting towards the two. The sudden turn of events shattered the two's expectations. Maxine's slender eyes narrowed into a straight line as she abruptly shot towards the rooftops when the demon's lair edge was about to shoot towards her chest, fleeing into the distance without a care for anything else. A ghastly howl sounded from Asa's mouth behind Maxine. The noisy street was thrown into chaos by this howl, and the more cowardly merchants all covered their heads as they scurried away. They didn't know what danger was about to befall them, so they immediately ran away. The various mercenaries that followed the merchants and were responsible for their safety first surrounded their employers before paying attention to their surroundings. Thunder Archmage Asa's right hand had been chopped off from the crook of his arm due to Maxine's departure. Blood gushed out like a fountain, splattering everywhere. The Demon's Lair Edge had chopped off a section of Asa's right hand and sent it flying high into the air. It spun in the air and once again turned around in an attempt to reap Asa's life. Asa was a qualified mercenary after all. He was able to maintain a cool head even in the most panicked of moments. Asa didn't hesitate in this moment where he could lose his life at any second. His empty left hand quickly picked up his right hand that had fallen to the ground after being chopped off. He used the levitation spell without hesitation and immediately flew into the air. At the same time, a circle of lightning instantly formed around his body, turning him into a man of electricity. The Demon's Lair Edge once again flew towards Asa, crackling with electricity. Before the Demon's Lair Edge could reach Asa's body, it was invaded by the fierce electricity and slowed down its piercing speed. When the Demon's Lair Edge reached Asa's back, a series of crackling sounds could be heard from Asa's body. The electrical net that had wrapped around Asa's body had invaded the Demon's Lair Edge with a strong electric energy, causing the magical yuan Han Shuo had poured into it to become chaotic. In the end, the Demon's Lair Edge's speed was slowed down and it stabbed towards Han Shuo's back, but didn't take Asa's life. Although Asa hadn't been stabbed to death, the rampaging magical yuan within the Demon's Lair Edge had violently churned about, causing Asa's back to feel as if he'd been struck by a heavy boulder. His fluttering body was like a kite with a broken string, swaying violently and almost falling down. Finally, he staggered all the way to a room and landed, crying for help as soon as he entered. "Let's go, Asa's injuries are even worse than Florida's. I think it's becoming more and more unrealistic for the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band to win against the Cairo Mercenary Band this time." Han Shuo chuckled coldly as he walked out of an alley with Gilbert and Trunks. "Treacherous master, why didn't you take the opportunity to kill him? Asa would have died without a doubt if he'd just stabbed him again." Gilbert looked at Han Shuo in puzzlement and asked in confusion. "The place where Asa landed is the resting area of the Cairo Mercenary Band. No matter how fierce the battle between the Cairo Mercenary Band and the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band is, anyone in Tanai under the glorious sun will be protected by the Cairo Mercenary Band. Whether the mercenaries are willing or not, they have to help Asa. We can't kill Asa inside, or we'll definitely offend Loridan," Trunks explained to Gilbert. When I ambushed Asa, the surrounding Cairo Mercenary Band members didn't say a word, and no one stepped out to help them from afar. This is already making things easier for us. You stupid dragon, use your brain more. Don't just think of some dirty thoughts all day long. Han Shuo lectured Gilbert, hating that Gilbert didn't live up to his expectations. "It's a pity that we let that Maxine escape. That woman's vigilance is quite high," Trunks said regretfully. Nodding, Han Shuo said in agreement, "It's a bit of a pity that she escaped. Perhaps it's because she's also skilled in the way of assassination that she's so vigilant. That woman hiding in the shadows is much more of a threat than Asa. You must be careful in the future and don't let her find an opportunity to take advantage of." The three talked as they returned to the path of the shop. The three demons had been placed in the surroundings along the way, and no one could escape Han Shuo's observation. They didn't meet any more danger. An orc shop had a few exotic flowers and grasses in front of it, as well as some intricate little trees. One of the plants had 3 golden leaves and milky white roots that were as hard as stalactites. It sparkled with a faint white luster and attracted Han Shuo's attention. Han Shuo had discovered this shop through the demons. After a moment's observation, Han Shuo said to the two, "Come, let's take a look at this shop." Trunks and Gilbert were already used to Han Shuo's strange behavior. They were used to Han Shuo's mysteriousness and didn't ask any questions. They followed Han Shuo to the orc shop in the distance. When they arrived in front of the shop, some exotic flowers and grasses attracted Han Shuo's attention. Some of the flowers and grasses had a refreshing fragrance, while others had strange shapes and colors. Many of the little trees had crystal-clear roots that looked like pieces of beautiful jade. He didn't know how they grew. Han Shuo moved closer to the 3 golden leaves and placed his nose close to them. An alluring fragrance seeped into Han Shuo's mouth and nose, making him feel relaxed and happy. Han Shuo stared at the veins of the 3 dazzling golden leaves for a while, then reached out with his hand and closed his eyes to touch the stalactite. His brow creased tightly as he slowly considered something. Gilbert and Trunks looked at Han Shuo with strange expressions. They didn't understand Han Shuo's behavior and why he would be interested in these strange flowers and grasses. After a while, Han Shuo's eyebrows suddenly twitched as his pair of deep eyes were replaced by an expression of ecstasy. He then carefully examined all the strange flowers and plants in front of the door with even greater enthusiasm. His entire person seemed to be indescribably excited, as if he'd suddenly picked up some sort of treasure. Gilbert and Trunks looked at each other, not knowing what Han Shuo had discovered. They looked at Han Shuo's strange behavior in a daze, feeling a little baffled. After sweeping his eyes over the strange plants in front of the shop, Han Shuo took a deep breath and said to Gilbert and Trunks, "I need these special plants. Let's go and see if there are any greater rewards inside." Han Shuo's excited expression slowly returned to normal after he finished speaking, and he walked inside with large strides. Chapter 225. The shop owner was a tall and strong old beastman. Even in the cold winter, this old beastman only wore thin clothes, and his coarse skin covered his lush body. He rested lazily in the shop. There were many kinds of strange flowers and plants placed everywhere in the shop. Each of these strange flowers and plants had a different color, and the shop was filled with a refreshing fragrance. After Han Shuo walked in, he just glanced at the old beastman and continued to wander among the flowers and plants. He carefully identified these strange flowers and plants, looking for what he needed. In Chu Kanglin's memory, there was a paragraph related to alchemy. It was obtained after Chu Kanglin killed a cultivator who was an alchemist and took his alchemy technique for himself. There was a period of time when Chu Kanglin spent a lot of time studying alchemy techniques. Chu Kanglin even refined a few furnaces of alchemy pills by himself according to the alchemy technique. However, in addition to the alchemy furnace and alchemy technique, the most important thing in alchemy was the materials needed. The more precious the elixir, the rarer the materials needed. Many of them were spiritual objects between heaven and earth. If one wanted to refine the elixir, they must first have enough materials. In the world that Han Shuo originally lived in, all the famous mountains and rivers had gradually become tourist attractions because of the serious pollution. Some precious medicinal herbs had long been mined out. Even with Chu Kanglin's remarkable ability to fly in the sky and burrow into the ground, it took him a year or two to collect the materials for a furnace of energy-gathering pill. It was precisely because of the scarcity of materials and the fact that Chu Kanglin was not a very patient person that he finally gave up using elixir to enhance his strength. However, the memory of alchemy was still deeply imprinted in the depths of his memory. This time, the plant with golden leaves and stalactite-like roots in front of the old beastman's shop attracted Han Shuo's attention. After Han Shuo carefully examined it and carefully looked at the strange plant according to the method in his memory, he finally confirmed that this strange plant only grew in caves with natural stalactites. It absorbed the stone marrow inside for hundreds of years and gathered the yin qi of heaven and earth to form the golden marrow grass. The golden marrow grass was cold in nature, and was a natural treasure of the great yin. Together with some other spiritual objects, it could be used to refine the nirvana pill, which could expand the bones and meridians of a mortal. The body would undergo an earth-shattering transformation, becoming a body suitable for cultivation. There was also a small tree that was bright red like a ruby. It was full of vermilion fruits. The bright red fruits were round and crystal clear. Under the illumination of the sunlight, they shone with a faint red light, like a few miniature suns that were dazzling. When Han Shuo carefully examined them, he confirmed that they were actually fire attribute treasures, the blazing fruit. Cultivators who practiced fire attribute cultivation methods or devil cultivators could directly consume this blazing fruit and use their own methods to channel the enormous power of the sun, greatly improving their cultivation in a short period of time. However, if one did not practice fire attribute cultivation methods and consumed the blazing fruit by mistake, they would not be able to withstand the fire power contained within it. They would be burned by the power of the blazing fruit, and when they turned into charcoal, the spirit power of the blazing fruit would slowly dissipate between heaven and earth. Apart from the golden marrow grass and the blazing fruit, this shop also had dragonfly fruit, 100-year vine heart, extreme frost grass, and other rare items. They were all precious materials that some pill refiners needed. When Han Shuo discovered these treasures, he naturally wasn't willing to let them go so easily. After a while, Han Shuo arranged all the rare spirit herbs that he recognized in this shop neatly and placed them in front of the old orc's counter. He said with a smile, "Old man, how much do these things cost?" The old orc had been sitting there lazily and had long since seen Han Shuo's actions. He had been observing Han Shuo closely, and only stood up unhurriedly when Han Shuo finally placed all the items in front of him. Contrary to Han Shuo's expectations, the tall, strong old orc did not immediately respond to Han Shuo's question about the price of these herbs. Instead, he looked at Han Shuo with some interest and asked Han Shuo in response, "You recognize these things and know what they are used for?" The old orc's voice was hoarse and thick, and sounded a bit awkward when he spoke the human language. His two large nostrils snorted as he spoke, making him look a bit odd. I just thought it was a bit odd and wanted to buy it to study." Han Shuo responded with a smile. The old orc was a bit disappointed when he heard that Han Shuo didn't recognize them either. He said to himself with some self-deprecation, "I knew it, so many pill refiners don't recognize them, how would you know what these things are?" Pointing at the blazing fruit, the old orc explained to Han Shuo, "Curious human lad, these things aren't fun. These strange poisonous herbs grow in the barren lands of our home, and no one dares to play with them. For example, this red fruit. Even some ferocious wild beasts will be burned to death if they mistakenly eat this red fruit. Also, if you put your hand on the branches and leaves of these strange little flowers, you'll feel a bone-piercing chill. Whoever eats them will be frozen into a block of ice. You're not a pill refiner, so it's best if you don't try to mix them carelessly. According to what I know, even some pill refiners have suffered terrible injuries when mixing them." The old orc obviously didn't know the wondrous uses of these natural treasures and instead thought of them as terrifying poisonous herbs. The blazing fruit and extreme frost grass were treasures of extreme heat and cold. Ordinary people would indeed be harmed if they took them, because ordinary people would definitely not be able to digest the spirit power within. It was normal for him to have this kind of misunderstanding. Chuckling lightly, Han Shuo said with a smile, "Don't worry, I'm not using these things carelessly. It's just that I know a pretty good pill refiner and he's quite accomplished with some strange herbs. I'm just giving them to others. Of course, I'll remember your reminder and tell them the characteristics of these poisonous herbs." Alright then, it was quite difficult for my children to bring these herbs from the faraway barren lands. You can give me 100 gold coins for all of these items. This is a very fair price, and there are some pill refiners who are very interested and willing to pay a large price for them. The old orc obviously didn't know what it meant for these items to fall into the hands of a knowledgeable person like Han Shuo. 100 gold coins wasn't even enough to buy a single leaf from one of the herbs. On account of the old orc's kind reminder earlier, plus the possibility that these herbs might be delivered to him in the future, Han Shuo generously threw down 500 gold coins and said, "Many thanks to the old man for your reminder. Your kind reminder is worth 400 gold coins, otherwise my friend may have run into great trouble. If you have more of these herbs, feel free to bring them over from the barren lands. I'll be sure to pay a large price for them when I have the time." "Oh, esteemed guest, your generosity will definitely be rewarded. Thank you very much." The old orc excitedly accepted a bag of 500 gold coins. His gaze when he looked at Han Shuo was completely different as he happily praised him. "Wait a moment." Suddenly, a clear voice rang out from outside the door. Then, a beautiful woman that even Han Shuo and the other two couldn't help but sigh in admiration walked in leisurely. Her tall and slender body was wrapped in a light purple dress. Her long brown hair flowed down like a waterfall, and below her slender phoenix eyebrows were a pair of limpid eyes. Further down was a delicate nose, small crimson-red lips, tender and smooth skin, and an oval face. All of these were the elements that a beautiful woman should have. She looked to be only in her early 20s, but her entire being exuded the air of someone who held great power and had experienced great things. Although she didn't purposefully reveal it, her entire being naturally exuded a disdainful aura, as if she could easily decide the life and death of others. "Hi, beautiful, are you talking to me?" After a loud whistle, Dark Dragon Gilbert looked at the woman excitedly and said lightly, "Not you." She flicked a glance at Gilbert and responded faintly. She didn't look at Gilbert again and walked directly towards Han Shuo. When she arrived in front of Han Shuo, she extended a slender finger and pointed at the extreme frost grass. Her limpid eyes looked at Han Shuo and said, "Can you give this poisonous grass to me?" Shaking his head, Han Shuo smiled faintly and said, "I'm sorry, I can't." After being deflated, the beautiful woman looked at Han Shuo with a dumbfounded expression, as if she hadn't thought that Han Shuo would refuse so straightforwardly. Her phoenix eyebrows furrowed beautifully and she opened her mouth again. "I can pay 100 gold coins for this poisonous grass." Shaking his head again, Han Shuo also smiled faintly and still firmly refused. "I'm sorry, I'm not selling." After being deflated twice, she clearly knew that she wouldn't be able to obtain this extreme frost grass. She looked deeply at Han Shuo and said disdainfully, "A man with no poise." It looks like Emily's words weren't all that detailed. When these words were spoken, it was Han Shuo's turn to be stunned. He stared closely at the woman and asked tentatively, "Your mistress Cecilia?" Nodding her head with a cold expression, Cecilia raised her head to look at Han Shuo and said with a haughty expression, "That's me. May I ask Mr. Brian, what will it take for you to give this poisonous grass to me?" "I won't give it to you no matter what." Han Shuo responded, then said with a smile, "It's very nice to meet you, Mistress Cecilia. Goodbye." When these words were spoken, Han Shuo didn't look at Cecilia again and walked around her, directly walking out of the shop. Chapter 226. Honorable Master, I don't think this is your style. Why are you suddenly so cold to a beauty? On the way back, Gilbert had a puzzled expression. First of all, I have a use for that poisonous grass, so I definitely won't give it to her. In addition, this Cecilia thinks that her position is higher than mine, so she's swaggering around in front of me. This kind of attitude really disgusts me, so she can forget about getting the poisonous grass from my hands. According to Emily, Cecilia was a priest, and she also majored in pharmaceutics. Her attainments in pharmaceutics were extremely high. Although she wasn't the main combatant in battle, an expert like Cecilia, who majored in both, could play a crucial role. Such a character could allow warriors and mages in battle to quickly recover their physical strength. Even if they were injured, they could use some priest's magic and some potions to quickly treat them, so that the warriors' and mages' injuries could be stabilized, so that they could join the battlefield faster. After leaving the old orc's shop, Han Shuo didn't continue to stay outside, and went straight back to his base camp. Phoebe and Emily sat lazily on two wide chairs in the middle of the courtyard as they bathed in the crimson glow of the evening sun. They were happily chatting about something. As soon as Han Shuo walked into the courtyard, the two women's four eyes all turned to look at Han Shuo. After going through a day, the two women's expressions were natural, without the awkwardness in the morning. Under the illumination of the red evening glow, the two charming faces were bright red, gorgeous beyond compare. Their beautiful eyes were also full of affection, like a young wife at home looking forward to the return of her husband. In an instant, Han Shuo's heart was filled with a warm emotion. In a trance, Han Shuo felt that at this moment, the two women were so beautiful. If the truth was revealed, and the two women could still live in harmony, it would be a pleasant thing for any man. "What are you thinking about, standing there with a silly smile?" Only when facing Han Shuo would Phoebe be so easy to get close to, and her tone would be much softer. "No, nothing. beautiful wishes could only be wishful thinking for now. From Phoebe's personality, she wasn't a woman who would easily compromise. Therefore, Han Shua naturally wouldn't reveal any clues to avoid angering her and causing trouble. "Brian, I'm afraid I'll have to leave first this time. I've just received a mission with Sister Cecilia. I can't stay in the Valley of Sunshine any longer." Emily looked at Han Shua reluctantly and said apologetically. Han Shua was first taken aback, then fell silent. He understood that Emily, as a senior member of the Dark Mantle, had many things that she needed to do. She couldn't stay in the same place forever. Nodding, Han Shua revealed an understanding smile and said, "I understand. It's not suitable for us to stay in the Valley of Sunshine for the time being. I'm also preparing to leave." Under Phoebe and Emily's astonishment, Han Shua repeated to Emily and Phoebe what he'd said to Trunks and the others today, weighing the pros and cons in detail. Han Shua's decision wasn't wrong, so he quickly received the approval of Phoebe and Emily. "Then, what do we do next?" Phoebe's beautiful eyes focused on Han Shua as she asked softly. "You're in charge of the Buzzed Merchant Guild, so I don't think you can stay in the Valley of Sunshine forever. You can go attend to your matters first. I'll take care of some matters of my own and then head to the capital to find you. Trunks has enough gold to support him. I think with his abilities and connections, he'll be able to better develop his forces in the outskirts of the Valley of Sunshine. Alright, it looks like we'll need to split up for now. Here, this is what you need. The Valley of Sunshine is really a good place. You'll be able to find whatever resources you need as long as you have enough patience." Phoebe took out many strange ores and some rare metals from her space ring and placed them in the courtyard. She then looked at Han Shua with a smile. These were all the basic materials that Han Shua needed for the dwarves to forge weapons. There was also a bit that Han Shua wanted to keep for his personal use, planning on refining a few small magical weapons when he had the time. Phoebe had already given Han Shua the materials for refining the wood and water elite zombies. Now that all of the materials for refining the wood elite zombie had been gathered, Han Shua could head to the Forest Troll's Holy Land after returning to the Dark Forest this time and plant the wood elite zombie in the place of Extreme Wood, so that the wood elite zombie could be born as soon as possible. "Oh right, Trunks, pay attention to Odysseus and the others. I don't know how long they'll need to consider, but I think with your familiarity with the Valley of Sunshine, you'll certainly have a way to contact them at any time. I've already told them the situation. Whether they want to join the Soul Destroyers or not is up to them." Han Shua thought for a moment and said to Trunks, "Don't worry, I know what to do. The Valley of Sunshine isn't too far from the Dark Forest. It won't be too much trouble for the two of us to contact each other," Trunks said with a smile. On the way back, Han Shua and Trunks had already told each other about their points of contact in the Valley of Sunshine and the Dark Forest. Han Shua didn't tell Trunks about the existence of the Cemetery of Death, but left a mark at the waterfall where he often trained to make it easier for Trunks to contact him. The group of 5 discussed the details in detail for a while before Han Shua's group of 4 left the Valley of Sunshine under the cover of the night. With Gilbert around, the 4 didn't need to leave through the exit and left without making a sound. Only Emily had to leave with Cecilia and temporarily stay in the Valley of Sunshine for a day to pass on some things to Loredan. After leaving the Valley of Sunshine, the 4 immediately split up. According to Han Shua's instructions, Gilbert carried Phoebe on his back and flew directly to Zajoski City. He told Phoebe to use the transportation matrix in Zajoski City to safely return to the capital of the Empire and then meet up with Han Shua at the Cemetery of Death. After bidding farewell to Han Shua, Trunks burrowed into the depths of the forest alone and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. After the 3 left, Han Shua swaggered in the direction of the Dark Forest, neither hurrying nor slow. He didn't even use the art of the demonic Ninth Heavens. Han Shua planned on exposing his whereabouts when he left the Valley of Sunshine this time in order to attract the attention of the Church of Lights Ferguson. This was to prevent the latter from not knowing that he had left and not letting Trunks off afterwards. On the main road leading out of the Valley of Sunshine, Han Shua's expression was relaxed and at ease. He didn't ride any means of transportation, and his tall figure traveled alone under the bright moonlight, not the slightest bit aware that he was about to become a target. At such a crucial time, the glorious sun, Tanai, and the other four powers would certainly send people to patrol the area to prevent any accidents from happening. When Han Shuo wanted to expose himself, everything seemed very easy. Using the three Yin demons to spy on him, Han Shuo easily discovered that several groups of people were paying attention to his whereabouts. When a person hurriedly spoke a few words and quickly left with his companions, rushing in the direction of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band, Han Shuo understood that the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band would arrive before long. That Ferguson of the Church of Light would certainly drop everything at hand and eliminate the most dangerous, hidden danger first. Now that Han Shuo had reached the Bloodlust realm, he had the three Yin demons monitoring everything, the Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie at his disposal, and the extraordinarily fast art of the demonic Ninth Heavens. Han Shuo was confident that he could calmly escape from any encirclement. Therefore, from beginning to end, Han Shuo appeared very relaxed. He walked unhurriedly in the direction of the dark forest, waiting for Ferguson's group to arrive and then leisurely leave the Valley of Sunshine amidst their pursuit. He wanted them to understand that he had already left the Valley of Sunshine. It was the middle of winter, and the snow-covered mountain range presented a world of ice and snow. Under the bright moonlight, the sky didn't seem too dark even at night. The reflection of the moonlight and the snow made the silver-white world appear so quiet and beautiful. Under the moonlight, Han Shuo's lonely figure drew a long shadow on the snow-covered ground. In such a cold night, even some greedy merchants weren't willing to travel. Therefore, even on the most crowded roads, Han Shuo didn't run into a single merchant caravan. After leaving the main road, Han Shuo continued forward in the vast Kurlan mountain range. After Han Shuo had walked for more than an hour, he arrived at an even more remote forest. Through the Yin demon's surveillance, Han Shuo discovered a cruel atrocity. A small caravan of a few dozen people was being madly ravaged by ruthless bandits in the middle of the night. There weren't many bandits, only a dozen or so of them. However, each and every one of them was incomparably savage. Each and every one of them yelled wildly, ignoring the pleas of the merchants. While plundering the goods, they grinned hideously as they slaughtered the merchants. Several young women were stripped naked in the middle of the night in a world of ice and snow. They were forced onto the carriages and next to the big trees to be raped. Their helpless and painful screams made one's heart bleed. Around the caravan's carriage were several strong men dressed like mercenaries. They'd all been decapitated and their blood had dried, dyeing the ground black. It looked like they were the first wave of guards to be killed. It was obvious that this small caravan had thought that they wouldn't be targeted by bandits in the middle of the night and that they were taking a secluded path. That was why they'd taken the risk to travel at night. How could they have known that they'd misjudged and encountered a small group of bandits, resulting in such a cruel situation? Han Shuo wasn't a very kind person. He'd once commanded the forest troll to rob, but he'd never killed the innocent, nor would he commit such atrocities like raping women. As the saying went, even bandits had their own principles. Han Shuo felt that he'd done a pretty good job. However, the merchants had already offered up all their goods and knelt on the ground, kowtowing and begging, but they still had their heads chopped off by the ferocious bandits. This scene was intolerable to Han Shuo. The bandits' despicable and unruly methods completely infuriated Han Shuo. Without any greetings or superfluous words, Han Shuo, who'd used the Yin demons to witness the atrocities, broke through the air. Because of his anger, his blood and chi surged wildly. A thick, murderous aura followed Han Shuo's figure and descended on the scene. The gloomy Han Shuo's eyes were blood red. His cold face was frighteningly ferocious, and the murderous aura around him couldn't help but surge. He slashed at the neck of a bandit who was pressing down on a woman and raping her. The left palm that slashed out was as black jade, like a cold, sharp knife. With a "pu" sound, the bandit's head was sent flying far away. Blood sprayed everywhere from the headless neck. Ah! An extremely terrifying scream came from the mouth of the dead bandit. The woman, who'd been suffering in pain, suddenly saw that the person on top of her had been decapitated. Blood sprayed all over her from the severed neck. She couldn't help but scream. "Who are you? How dare you meddle in our business? Don't you know that our boss is the butcher?" A bearded bandit, who'd been about to kill a merchant, suddenly turned his head and roared. It was indeed Butcher Gustav's men. Of all the bandit factions in the Valley of Sunshine, only Butcher Gustav's bandits would be so cruel and unruly. There was no need to waste words with them. Han Shua directly expressed his attitude with his actions. With a gloomy face, Han Shua's murderous aura was terrifyingly thick. In front of these cruel bandits, he displayed the vicious side of a demonic cultivator. Han Shua directly rushed towards this person. Before he could react, the violent Han Shua's fist blasted down like a sharp iron awl. The bearded bandit's chest was directly pierced through by this punch. When Han Shua pulled out his bloody fist, there was a huge bloody hole in his chest. Even his shattered internal organs could be clearly seen. Han Shua's heart was filled with rage as he panted heavily. He was like a demon king who only knew how to kill. He used his ruthless coldness and perverse physical strength to crush the bandits one by one. With a rip of his hands, he tore a bandit in half. With a punch, the bandit's bones were all shattered and his flesh exploded. Hot blood sprayed all over Han Shua's body. A gust of bloody whirlwind blew past and a group of more than 10 bandits were all turned into scattered pieces of flesh. Compared to the innocent people they'd killed, their fates were even more terrible. Not a single corpse was whole. When Han Shua discovered Ferguson and Maxine's figures through the demons, he suppressed the bloodlust in his heart and continued walking in the direction of the dark forest with heavy steps. He didn't linger a second longer in this place that reeked of blood. Chapter 227. A wide river blocked the way. The surging river water flowed all the way to the low-lying area. Han Shua panted heavily as he stood in front of a towering ancient tree. He did his best to suppress his frenzied state of mind. His blood-red eyes were wide open as he turned his head to look at the two approaching figures. The two figures slowly approached under the bright night sky. Ferguson was carrying Maxine with magic, and they appeared in Han Shua's line of sight like two drifting clouds. "You've finally arrived. I've waited for some time." Fiendish aura churned all over his body as streaks of crimson light encircled Han Shua's body. This was the strange energy that his body had naturally absorbed from the bandits' fear and resentment just before their deaths. "Although your methods were cruel, you saved those people. This means that you're not a heartless person. I've already investigated you and know that you're not from the Calamity Church. However, some of the things you've grasped are too dangerous to this world. Therefore, I'll capture you and imprison you in the Church of Light forever. However, I won't take your life." Ferguson's body flew to the top of a tree branch as he looked at Han Shua calmly. The elven divine archer Maxine's pretty figure landed gracefully. She knocked an arrow and took aim at Han Shua. A sense of danger suddenly leapt into Han Shua's heart and he couldn't help but cast a few more glances at Maxine. "The Calamity Church has nothing to do with me. Moreover, I have no way of using the knowledge I possess to transform large numbers of dark creatures. I'm telling you clearly this time, I won't join the Calamity Church, and the Calamity Church is my enemy. But if you continue to tangle with me, I don't care if your reputation is good or bad. As long as you threaten me, I won't hesitate to kill you." Suppressing the crazy thoughts in his heart, Han Shua's expression was sinister as he spoke viciously. Ferguson shook his head and said resolutely, "I'm sorry. Not killing you is already the biggest concession I can make. I definitely can't let you go, because the things you've grasped are far too dangerous for us." It seemed like there was no way to back down. Grinning wildly, Han Shua nodded. "Since this is the case, then there's nothing more to say. If you dare make a move, I won't be lenient." Before he lost his reason, Han Shua suddenly soared into the air and transformed into a streak of bloody light, flying towards the dark forest. Whoosh! Maxine shot out an arrow that she'd long since prepared. It was like a bolt of lightning streaking through the air, piercing through the air with an ear-piercing whistle. The arrow followed Han Shua like a shadow, as if it wouldn't stop until it saw blood. Grand Magus Ferguson wasn't idle either. Just as Han Shua's body shot through the air, he waved the staff in his hand and a beam of blinding light shot towards Han Shua like a laser cannon. The surging energy made Han Shua realize just how dangerous this light was. Han Shua had been standing in the air when he felt the attack coming from behind him. His forward-charging body froze in midair as the demon's lair edge moved according to his will, flying out of his sleeve to meet Maxine's arrow. Han Shua activated his magical yuan and the murderous aura around his body quickly condensed on his right arm. Bloody light shot out from Han Shua's right arm in the blink of an eye. Violent energy surged like a great river beneath his body, blasting towards the beam of light under the augmentation of magical yuan. An ear-splitting explosion rang out, accompanied by blinding white light and bloody light, intersecting beautifully in the night sky. It was as if a ball of brilliant fireworks had been released, possessing a strange, bewitching beauty. Han Shua's figure fell straight down amidst the moving splendor. He fell into the great river with a splash and was instantly swallowed by the surging waters. Ferguson brought Maxine along with him through magic as the two hovered in the air above the place where Han Shua had fallen. They gazed at the surging waters, not knowing what to do for the time being. After waiting in the air for a while, Han Shua's figure had disappeared without a trace amidst the surging waters. This greatly surprised Ferguson and Maxine. Judging from the strength he displayed that day, he shouldn't have died so easily. Why hasn't he surfaced yet? It's impossible for him to not breathe for a long time. Ferguson looked around in astonishment and said with some doubt. He might have died already, otherwise he would have left the water long ago. No one can stop breathing. Maxine was also perplexed and speculated with some uncertainty. If he's not dead, then he must have been washed downhill by the current. Come, let's go take a look downhill. After waiting for a while, Ferguson confirmed that Han Shua was no longer here and flew towards the direction of the river with Maxine. Dark Grand Magus Edwin and the female alchemist Belinda walked out from the shadows of a large tree after Ferguson and Maxine had disappeared. It's a good thing we were far away, otherwise that old fox Ferguson would have discovered us. It looks like that Brian must have run into big trouble, Edwin said with lingering fear. He was attacked by Ferguson and Maxine at the same time, so he must have fallen into the water. He's probably dead since he hasn't come out for so long. Belinda guessed the same thing as Maxine as she gazed at the surging waters. Shaking his head with a faint smile, Edwin said with certainty, "No, he's definitely not dead. The onlooker sees the game more clearly than the onlooker. I noticed a few details when they were exchanging blows. Although Brian's weapon also fell into the river after colliding with Maxine's arrow, its trajectory was stable. According to what you said before, his weapon should still be under his control. This means that Brian didn't faint or die after falling into the river, otherwise he wouldn't be able to control his weapon." Belinda thought back with astonishment after Edwin's words and agreed, "Yes, he must still be alive. Haha, the stronger he is and the more he can protect himself, the more advantageous it is for us. As long as he's not dead, we'll have a chance to obtain him. He'll definitely appear again. We need to understand everything about him before then. We must obtain this person." Edwin cackled lowly and left with Belinda. The surging river was incomparably wide. A figure shot into the air like a sharp arrow from a place far away from where Han Shua had fallen into the water. After ascertaining his direction in the air, he shot towards the dark forest like a bolt of lightning. Edwin's judgment had been quite accurate. The killing aura that had condensed on Han Shua's right arm had completely blocked Ferguson's blinding beam of light when he'd faced the two's previous attacks. His body hadn't been harmed at all. He'd already used his consciousness to summon the demon's lair edge into his hand when he'd entered the river and then dashed wildly through the river, avoiding Ferguson and returning to the air. Han Shua had originally planned on fighting Ferguson and Maxine, but Edwin had exposed himself in his eagerness to see what was going on and was discovered by one of the three demons. This caused Han Shuo to give up on the idea and take the opportunity to dive into the river and create the illusion of drowning, taking advantage of this opportunity to leave that place of trouble. With Han Shuo's current strength, he was confident that he could easily retreat with the help of the Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie, as well as his magical yuan and necromancy magic. Although he might not be able to defeat Ferguson and Maxine, he was confident that the two would be unable to stop him. However, Edwin and Belinda's appearance forced Han Shuo to give up on the idea of fighting. To Han Shuo, these two from the Calamity Church were just as hard to deal with. If they ambushed him while he was fighting Ferguson and Maxine, it would be a very unpleasant experience. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, Han Shuo felt that there was no benefit in staying. He finally decided to temporarily avoid them and use magical yuan to leave through the river. The last time he'd gone to the Cemetery of Death with Fanny's group, it had taken more than 10 days. However, the existence of the art of the demonic ninth heavens had saved Han Shuo a great deal of time. He'd only spent a day and a night flying through the air, arriving at the Cemetery of Death on the evening of the second day. Although he'd adjusted his breathing 3 times along the way, Han Shuo had still expended a great deal of magical yuan when he arrived at the Cemetery of Death. Han Shuo had no choice but to adjust his breathing and recover again. The 3 Yin demons had been placed outside the Cemetery of Death by Han Shuo to wait for Dark Dragon Gilbert. Han Shuo closed his eyes and rested for the night, recovering his spirit the next day. The Cemetery of Death was enveloped by a strong boundary, unable to feel the light of the sun or moon at any time. It was shrouded in a dark and cold environment all year round. White bones piled up all over the ground, making this place a paradise for the dead. Seeing that Gilbert still hadn't returned, Han Shuo couldn't help but take out some of the materials that Phoebe had given him and study them one by one. Apart from some of the materials that Han Shuo had asked Phoebe to collect to forge weapons for the dwarves, he also planned on refining some magical treasures with special effects. The demon infant had already taken form, and Han Shuo's magical yuan had reached the bloodlust realm. He now had the ability to refine magical treasures. This time, not only did Han Shuo want to refine the demon's lair edge, he also wanted to add some good items with special effects to it. Chapter 228. For the next 2 days, Han Shuo stayed in the Cemetery of Death. Han Shuo sat cross-legged amidst the white bones, the demon's lair edge floating in front of his chest. Bolts of blazing lightning curled around the demon's lair edge. Han Shuo held his breath and stared calmly at the demon's lair edge. From time to time, he would send out beams of demonic fire from his hands, or bite his finger and drip a few drops of blood essence into the demon's lair edge. He would slowly use the demon infant in his heart to guide the magical yuan, nourishing the demon's lair edge over and over again. Han Shuo held some rare metal ores in his left and right hands. 2 balls of blazing red flames submerged the center of Han Shuo's palms. The scorching demonic fire carried a terrifyingly high temperature and slowly melted the incomparably hard metal ores, turning them into a multicolored liquid that fell into the demon's lair edge floating in front of his chest. Before Han Shuo formed the demon infant, he didn't have the ability to refine demonic treasures. Therefore, the basic shape of the demon's lair edge had been requested from the famed dwarven craftsman. The dwarves had mixed the sharpest metals into the demon's lair edge according to Han Shuo's wishes. It took a few days and nights to complete the demon's lair edge. Reality proved that the demon's lair edge that Han Shuo had spent a huge amount of money and the dwarves had painstakingly forged was indeed incomparably sharp. Ordinary metal weapons would definitely break into 2 pieces when cut by the demon's lair edge. However, a true demonic treasure wasn't just enough to be sharp. It also needed some special effects to be considered a treasure. The demon's lair edge was a great weapon in Chu Kanglin's memories. After it was truly refined, a demonic cultivator in the bloodlust realm would be able to unleash its extraordinary effects when using it. The word slayer in the demon's lair edge indicated that its effects were inseparable from slaughter. This was indeed the case. When the demon's lair edge was successfully refined and a demonic cultivator in the bloodthirsty realm used the demon's lair edge to kill, the murderous aura that naturally surrounded the demonic cultivator would absorb the fear and resentment of the dead. If the demonic cultivator had the demon's lair edge in their hands at this time, the demon's lair edge would be able to absorb the fear and resentment of the deceased and store them all within the demon's lair edge. When the demon's lair edge absorbed enough of this strange energy, the fear and resentment would naturally form a demonic soul within the demon's lair edge, turning it into a peerless weapon with its own consciousness. As the wielder killed more and more people, the demon's lair edge would absorb more and more negative energy. When the demonic soul finally formed, the wielder could use the demon's lair edge, this peerless weapon, to battle with others. Just the enormous amount of killing intent within the demon's lair edge alone would be enough to cause others to lose their mind, and the demonic soul within the demon's lair edge would destroy all their confidence. Apart from that, when the demon's lair edge became a great weapon and possessed a demonic soul of its own, it would also possess some other inconceivable uses. It could even be used to refine Han Shua's avatar, which would be able to continuously evolve like Han Shua's main body and grasp even more terrifying power. However, in order for such a powerful weapon to take shape, the number of strange materials required exceeded Han Shua's imagination. Apart from the various strange metals that the dwarves had mixed in at the beginning, Han Shua was currently continuously fusing even more rare materials into the demon's lair edge, using his magical yuan and the demon infant to refine it bit by bit, infusing even more of his blood essence into the demon's lair edge, ensuring that it could take shape as quickly as possible. The process of refining the demon's lair edge wasn't something that could be done in one go. It was a process of slowly fusing with itself, using magical yuan and the demon infant's blood essence to refine the demon's lair edge bit by bit. It definitely wouldn't take a day or two. In these 2 days, Han Shua was only slowly fusing the materials that the demon's lair edge required, then using his magical yuan, demon infant, and blood essence to slowly establish a more intimate connection with the demon's lair edge bit by bit, building the foundation of the demon's lair edge. In this way, when the demon's lair edge wasn't out, it could transform into a rice-sized ball and hide within Han Shua's blood essence that was nourishing the demon infant, continuing to provide it with the energy it needed to refine the demon's lair edge. When Han Shua was attacking and killing, the demon's lair edge could instantly escape and instinctively absorb the energy of the dead while Han Shua was killing. Until one day, when the demon's lair edge had absorbed enough energy from the dead and formed a demonic soul within its handle, it would truly take shape and become a peerless weapon, a terrifying demonic treasure. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. When Han Shua hid the demon's lair edge within his body and slowly adjusted his breathing to recover his vitality, he discovered traces of Gilbert's return through the 3 demons' observation. Returning to his senses from his cross-legged position, Han Shua stood up and took out the Eye of Darkness to help Gilbert open the boundary. When Gilbert came in, Han Shua discovered that Gilbert was sparkling with divine light, his face full of lewd laughter. "What's wrong? Look at how you're smiling. With your flying speed, 2 days and 1 night should be enough for you to return to the cemetery of death. Why are you taking so long?" Han Shua questioned as he stared at Gilbert in astonishment. "Haha, I'm just a bit late, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I've already safely sent Miss Phoebe to Zajoski City, you can rest assured." Gilbert's smile was indescribably lewd, making Han Shua feel uncomfortable. Looking suspiciously at the dark dragon, a thought suddenly leapt into Han Shua's mind when he discovered that the dark dragon's lewd smile was a bit fatigued. Han Shua couldn't help but exclaim, "You didn't take advantage of the situation to spend money on prostitutes in Zajoski City, did you?" Gilbert wasn't the least bit embarrassed when he heard these words. He nodded with a lewd laugh and said, "Honored master, you're really smart. My grandfather was right, the taste of women is really wonderful. Those 2 chicks were really flirtatious, they kept tormenting me for an entire night. That's why I was delayed." As expected, the dark dragon race was famous for their lewdness. Just like the forest troll's instinct to pillage, lust was also an instinct of the dark dragon race. This was a deeply rooted racial trait that no one could change. Han Shua could understand the dark dragon's actions, but he was a bit surprised to see the dark dragon's fatigued appearance. "It's said that you dark dragons are famous for your tyrannical strength in this aspect. Could it be that 2 women in 1 night have made you so tired?" "Honored master, this is the first time I've done 2 women for a long time in one night, and I've even flown all the way back. Isn't this battle record impressive enough? It's said that human men are very weak in this area. They definitely can't have such a powerful battle record as mine. Gilbert puffed out his chest and said proudly. Shaking his head in disdain, Han Shuo said, if it were me, I could do it for as long as I wanted. Not only would my body be fine, it would even be stronger. TCH, you keep bragging. Although you're very strong, Master, you're still a human. Humans definitely can't compare to our dark dragon race in this area. Gilbert first said disdainfully to Han Shuo, and then proudly affirmed it. It seemed that in his mind, this concept was deeply ingrained and absolutely could not be changed easily. Han Shuo's words weren't empty. With his bloodthirsty demonic cultivation level, coupled with some evil demonic arts, he could indeed remain standing. He could even use demonic arts to harvest yin and replenish his yang to replenish his own vital energy. In this way, not only would he not harm himself at all, but he could also improve his strength through sex. It was very magical. Some demonic secret techniques were divided into collecting yin to replenish yang, collecting yang to replenish yin. There was also a kind of double cultivation method called delightful zen, which was beneficial to both parties. These demonic secret techniques were fully understood by Han Shuo after he obtained all of Chu Kanglin's memories. Before today, Han Shuo didn't pay much attention to them. Now, because of the matter with Gilbert, he suddenly remembered that perhaps he could use Delightful Zen's double cultivation method to bring benefits to both parties when he dual cultivated with Emily. Therefore, when he thought of those evil secret techniques, Han Shuo fell into a short period of silence. He carefully recalled those secret techniques in his mind and slowly considered the possibilities. Some of these secret techniques didn't require a practitioner's inner yuan or demonic yuan. They only needed to grasp some special techniques and train one's body to achieve that goal. There were also a few more powerful ones that required the activation of both inner yuan and demonic yuan. However, only a little bit of inner yuan and demonic yuan was required to successfully deploy them, achieving the miraculous effect of replenishing one's yin and replenishing one's yin. Lecherous dragon, tell me honestly. If you frequently do this kind of thing, with your dark dragon race's body, won't it cause harm to your body? Han Shuo suddenly said to Gilbert after thinking for a while. Of course, no matter what race, if this kind of thing is excessively carried out, it will cause harm to the body. Us dark dragons are no exception. Especially when we need to evolve, we must put an end to this kind of thing. Otherwise, the damage to the body will be even greater. However, for us dark dragons, this is our nature and it is very difficult to control. There are often some dark dragons who can't control themselves and indulge in the process of evolution. Not only will they fail to evolve, but their rank will also drop. This is not strange. Dark Dragon Gilbert answered Han Shuo's question honestly. Creatures like giant dragons were the most powerful super-rank magical beasts among magical beasts. However, there was also a strict division of ranks among super-rank magical beasts due to the difference in strength. In general, super-rank magical beasts were divided into 5 ranks, which was completely opposite to the division of ordinary magical beasts. The strongest super-rank magical beasts were rank 5, and those that were just born were rank 1. For example, Dark Dragon Gilbert hadn't evolved even once. He was still a rank 1 magical beast when he was just born, and belonged to the lowest rank among super-rank magical beasts. He only possessed some of the innate characteristics and offensive abilities of his race. Ha ha, little lecherous dragon, oh little lecherous dragon. You've been with me for so long, but Master has never given you anything good. This time, I'll make it up to you in one go. I'll teach you a miraculous martial technique so that you won't have to worry about the consequences in the future. Not only will your body not be weak in the slightest when you visit prostitutes, your strength will also grow stronger and stronger. It won't matter even when you evolve. Han Shuo looked at the black dragon and laughed strangely. I don't believe it. How can there be such a mysterious martial technique in this world? This is absolutely not true, don't try to lie to me. Dark Dragon Gilbert obviously didn't believe Han Shua's words and shook his head nonchalantly. "You'll definitely believe it." Han Shua walked towards Gilbert and placed his hand on his shoulder. A stream of magical yuan flowed along Gilbert's body and slowly flowed towards his lower abdomen. What is this?" Dark Dragon Gilbert jumped in fright and said in shock, "Why does it feel like a small snake has drilled into my body?" "Stay still and don't move. Master is inspecting the structure of your body." Han Shua shouted softly and stopped Gilbert's strange movements. The stream of magical yuan then followed Han Shua's thoughts and traveled once around Gilbert's lower abdomen. He discovered that the structure of Dark Dragon Gilbert's transformed body was indeed a bit different from his own. After thinking for a moment, Han Shua carefully recalled a secret method of harvesting yin to replenish yang and tried to move it around Gilbert's body. After half an hour, Han Shua dripped a drop of blood essence into Gilbert's body, lifted his clothes, and dropped it into Dark Dragon Gilbert's navel. He then shouted in a low voice, "Try to control the snake according to its trajectory and slowly guide it into your navel. As long as you can do it, you will be able to use this mysterious martial technique in the future." After saying this, Han Shua released his hand from Dark Dragon Gilbert's shoulder and looked at Dark Dragon Gilbert with sparkling eyes. He watched as sweat beaded on his forehead and nervously followed Han Shua's instructions with a face full of fear and trepidation. However, he still couldn't grasp the essence of the technique. At this time, Han Shua had no way to guide him. He had to grasp the knack of the technique himself so that he could use it proficiently in the future. The drops of blood essence that entered his navel were like a seed that could turn the tides of the universe. They could provide a hiding place for the magical yuan Han Shua injected, allowing him to successfully execute the secret method of harvesting yin to replenish yang. Han Shua had already done everything that could be done for him. However, the structure of his body was different from that of humans after all. Whether or not he could succeed would depend on his own luck. Although it should be possible in theory, Han Shua wasn't confident in himself and sized him up with some apprehension. After a while, Dark Dragon Gilbert looked at Han Shua in a fluster and shouted anxiously, "All right, it's in. I did it. The little snake has returned to my navel." Overjoyed, Han Shua hurriedly asked, "Then how does your body feel right now?" I'm hard, very very hard." A small tent was propped up under Gilbert's body. He looked down at his lower body, not knowing what to do. He spoke frantically. Hard is good, ha." Han Shua laughed heartily and said proudly, "Very good, perverted dragon, you've succeeded. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.